Madam Chair, yes, I am here.
Okay, and can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. We just always do this sound test before we get started. Thank you, Bob.
You bet, thanks. Madam Chair, I'm showing 4 o'clock. We can begin when you're ready.
Yep, and my clock is showing 4 o'clock too. So Mr. Schur, would you please start our study session?
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right, we only have one hearing case for next month, and that is ZC 22004, a request for a zone change from the general zone to the RC zone with approval of a master development plan for development of resort, including 70 casita lots, and those are recreational vehicle lots, and 161 resort residences, which are cabins on a 61.98 acre parcel. The subject property is located about half a mile south of the Newman Park exit. Let me go ahead and share my screen and I will walk you through this case. Okay, so this is ZC 22004, of course, and this is information I just gave you on this case. This is the subject property. The Newman Park exit is about here. It's about half a mile south. A little bit further south is another exit. I believe it's called Willow Springs. So it's right between those two exits, about 5 miles north of Munns Park, a little bit south of Kachina Village. And this is an aerial photo showing the subject property. So you can see that it is primarily a meadow property, and I'm not showing it, but there is actually a floodplain that comes in like this, right in this area. Okay, I'll give you a little background on it. Basically, there was a similar case on this same property back in 2001. And that case was recommended for approval by the commission, but it was denied by the board, and that was on April 13th. In a nutshell, the zoning ordinance does allow you to come back with a similar case, and in this particular case, it's similar but different. If you wait the full year, you can come back with exactly the same proposal. In this case, the applicant decided to come back with a different proposal, and they were allowed to go ahead and apply because it was determined this was substantially different. And basically the director indicated that if they came back with 20% reduction in density, that he would consider that substantially different than the original proposal. So this proposal is 22.5% reduction in density from the original proposal. So in this case, what they did was they originally had 151 RV sites, and they changed that to 70 sites. They're calling those casitas because each of them would actually have a cabin next to it, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. And they originally had 147 cabins, and they've changed that to 161, what they're calling resort residences. So this is the previous development plan, just to show you, what's changed from this one. You can see these are the RV sites along all on the front end, which is the west side, closest to I-17. And then behind those, you'll see all of these cabins along this area. Everything else, most of the other things on here have changed except for the layout of this. They still propose a stream between the ponds. They're proposing to move the floodplain, which is roughly in this area. And I have to quantify that. That's the FEMA floodplain. It hasn't been delineated, or so the elevations haven't been established for the flood yet. So once they did a flood study, they would determine exactly where the floodplain really is on this property. And that would be moved to the west side over here. And open up the area for development for this development. The wrong way. All right, this is their current proposal, the new proposal. And basically they've cut back a lot on the number of RV sites, which they call casitas. And they've put them just in the middle right here. And they've also backed off. There's more area up here. There's more buffer between here and the highway. And then they'll put cabins on each end like this. And I wanted to show you just this one change that they have with their what they call casitas. This is the original plan. They called them resort RV sites. And with this plan, the original plan, they had 3 different options, and the applicant is here, by the way, and they can correct me on anything I miss here, but they had 3 options: just a garage with a bathroom, or a complete cabin, basically with a family room, bedrooms, bathrooms, kitchen, everything. So what they've done, the change is that they've just gone with one option.
Mr. Short, we can't hear you anymore.
Casita living space, and it is basically just it has some extra living space. I'm not sure if the commission remembers this. They have the proposal is, and again, the applicant can correct me if I miss something on this, but it's similar to a manufactured home park where their client could come in and they could purchase the cabins, the structures, both the cabins or these casitas, and they would own the casita, the structure, but then they would lease the land underneath it on long-term leases. And I'm not sure how long those would be, but they are proposing that rather than doing a subdivision or a condominium. I think that's basically it. With that, I'll take any questions from the commission.
Bob, could you please go back? Oh, good. That's exactly what I want, because I wanted to take a picture so that I could compare these two. That's the new plan.
This is the new. You want to go to the old one, the original as well?
If memory serves, the issue that the Board of Supervisor had was kind of a gateway issue, view from the highway issue. Is that correct?
Oh, I just discussed this. The record for that hearing is contained in a 68-page transcript. So I haven't read the entire thing, but that was my understanding, was that their policies and comprehensive plan about development in floodplains and in meadows. And that was my understanding, but I have not read all of that. But that was, yeah, the visual impacts were certainly part of that. Yep.
And it doesn't seem like this is substantially different from the highway. Is that correct? I'm trying to compare these two pictures I've got here.
I think part of it is if you, and I'll move back to the other one in a second here, but if you look there, and this is a judgment call, of course, right? It's an aesthetic call, I guess, but cabins are more attractive than RVs potentially. So there are a lot fewer RVs. They're further away from the highway, and there are more cabins. So if you can look at this, this is the new plan, and this is the old plan. So you can see there are a lot more RVs. They're also closer. There's less buffer there than there is in the new case. See how much more. So they have saved a lot more of the meadow in this case.
And that's a stream between the ponds. Do we feel like with the landscaping over the long term that substantial amounts of this will be covered from the highway? You'll see trees instead of cabins.
I think that might be difficult, but that could happen. I can let the applicant speak about that if you want to ask them that question. But if it's ponderosa trees, they'll take a long time to grow up that high.
Yeah.
The other thing is that the highway is substantially higher. I'm sure all of you have been by here many times. Substantially higher than the meadow. So it is going to take a bit. My memory is that there were a few more trees down in this the south end that already kind of blocked it. They're not showing them on here. So they may be further down and it may be off of this property. But we can ask the applicant how they feel about that, what kind of, and sorry, I didn't bring up the landscape plan this time. I wanted to kind of keep it simple.
Are there plantings between the highway and the development?
Yeah, that's my understanding that there are. I can go into my file and pull that out if you'd like to see that. But I think it might be best just to have the applicant address that issue.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Yep, you bet.
Commissioner Ruggles, I see your hand raised.
Yes, I'd like to add something that might be a little helpful here. I sat in on the staff portion of the study session, and council raised a very good question about the casitas and the fact that the casitas would be purchased by a buyer on leased lots. Now, the model for this has been around for quite some time. It is a community land trust. We have a community land trust in Flagstaff. I am on the board of directors for the Flagstaff Town Site Community Land Trust, and this is a fairly widely used method of providing affordable housing in not just the United States, but also the UK and Australia. That being said, council raised a very good point that I don't think any of us caught the last time around with this proposed development. And that is, okay, if those lots for the casitas are property that will be leased to the buyer of the casita, is this a subdivision? Is it a mobile home park? Just exactly what is it? And I think determination of that needs to be at least discussed, if not made, as we go forward in looking at this. So hopefully that will give you something to look at, source of information to see how this is managed. I will say that community land trusts use this as a means of maintaining the property and maintaining its value.
Yeah, Commissioner Ruggles, that is certainly part of it. And of course, like I said before, the applicant is here and they can speak on this, but the applicant has let us know that they want to be obviously in control of the property so they can make sure it is kept up. and looks good. So
Yes, matter of fact, that's the primary driver behind this type of arrangement. I think it can be a very good one.
okay. Madam Chair, would you like the applicant to answer some of these questions, or you want to take them from the commission first?
Well, I don't see any other commissioners' hands raised or unmuted at this time. So I think it would be
Madam Chair,
appropriate to-
I've got a hand up. I think I have a hand up. This is Sot Best.
Oh, no, yeah, I do see you unmuted. I do apologize for that, Commissioner Best. I thought that you had already addressed that, but please do go ahead.
Thank you. I have another question. You have the list of 15 items that we have developed over the last year or two to mitigate forest impacts. Have you discussed those items with the applicant, and do you plan to integrate those into this?
Mr. Best, yes, we can certainly do that. I think they did have some significant conditions on here, but anything that we missed in that, I think would work very well to integrate those into the conditions for the zone change.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Short. I would just like to ask a question here, maybe make a comment, but going back to Commissioner Ruggles, information that he gave right now, that council asked the question about, what is this really? Is it a subdivision? Is it based on how the land is being managed? Wouldn't that be a question for council to actually come to a determination on? It seems to me like that would be a legal question that legal counsel would need to answer.
Madam Chair, actually, I asked the question to council during the staff section of this.
Gotcha. Okay, I do think that we're going to need some input from legal counsel, so we know how to move forward in that regard. I definitely concur with Commissioner Ruggles' comments. And let's see. Oh,
Madam
Commissioner
Chair,
Williams
Aaron
is
Lumpkin
unmuted.
Yeah, I just had a question about the casitas. Will they, Bob, do you know, will they contain heat? Are they for 4-season use, or is this mostly summer shoulder season?
My understanding that this will be open for all seasons, 4 seasons. It will not close. In fact, if you buy these, I mean, this is, we did discuss with the applicant, if the resort commercial was the right zone for this. And I think in the end, we determined it was. However, as you know, the county has gotten away from requiring seasonal use, like at Munns Park and places like that. So this would be open year round. That's my understanding. It would be open year round, and someone could purchase one of these and they could stay here, as long as they want. They could stay here part-time. They could stay here all the time. So in some sense, it might provide some affordable housing.
Yeah, I could see that. So I was just wondering, I guess in that case, they probably don't come with heat in them. Someone would, if they
I would think they would.
retrofit it?
I would
they
think
do?
I would think
Okay.
so. I mean, that's something, again, a question for the applicant, but I would say they would, yes.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Vice Chair Walters.
I would think that ADRE has the definitions pretty well defined as to what this is. I don't think we have to guess or ask the applicant. I think we can pretty well determine that from the Arizona Department of Real Estate definitions. Thank you.
Mr. Walters, I would say that would be correct. This is a sophisticated developer, and they do this in many other places. So I think they kind of understand this process and the way this would work.
I would think so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lutz, would you like to address the commission on the questions that have been asked?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yep.
can hear you.
We hear
Okay,
you good.
Good afternoon. And it's nice to be here and to be able to talk to you. I'm actually in Arizona as well. We spend half the year in Green Valley, and so I'm headquartered in Green Valley, Arizona as we speak, and happy to join you. I would like to mention that, and I have a few statistics that Bob maybe didn't mention, and you know, what we heard loud and clear at the commissioners meeting, a year or so ago, was that the meadow was a really prized and precious visual asset to the area. And so the most compelling thing for us was to recreate this project in such a way that we respected and preserved that meadow area as much as we could. And so I'd like to point out that although we're keeping a line of trees and some kind of soft mounding along the interstate, along the boundary on the west side, we're going to endeavor to preserve that meadow in its kind of current state as much as possible from north to south. And so we have at this point kind of maintained a minimum of 300 to 500 feet of setback from the property line to any of the development, with the exception of the main owner clubhouse that we're showing on the plan. And as an additional buffer, rather than mess with the meadow in terms of trying to plant inappropriate tree cover in the meadow itself, we're pulling that further to the east. And if you do have a chance to look at the landscape plan, you'll see that we have some more significant mounding and particularly coniferous cover on the west side of the westernmost roadways. I don't know, Bob, if I can take control of the cursor, but I could point things out maybe better that way. Can you all still hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Yes, I'm here, Bruce.
Yes, we
Sorry
sure
about that.
can.
I was going to go ahead and, as you can, I think, see, share the landscape plan. We could possibly do that. Allow you to take a hold on. You can take a hold of is this the lands? No, yeah, this is the landscape plan.
Yeah.
It doesn't show a lot more, I think, because it just shows where the landscape in a V. Anything you want to point out on this? It looks a little bigger. Hopefully you can see it better.
Yeah. I don't know. Can I show my cursor? Or is that impossible?
Marty, could he share his screen? Because otherwise you would have to share your screen to do that.
Okay.
Not sure if you were able to do that.
I could do that if let me press the share. See this.
Yeah, go ahead. I can stop and we can see if it works for you. It should.
I don't. Do you see anything now?
Yeah, we see your desktop,
See an ocean.
but you'd have to pull up that actual landscape plan if you have that available right there.
Hang on, I will get that presently. Just a second. And I'm gonna pull this onto that screen. So I've got multiple screens here. So are you seeing that now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, we sure are.
Okay. I'm going to do a little zooming here so you can, I hope. Well, can't do it. Anyway, can you see my cursor as well?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So back to what I was originally saying. So these clusters are existing trees, obviously. So we do have some existing tree cover on the south west portion of the property. But what we'll do along here is some kind of soft mounding all along this western boundary. And then our intention is to maintain and conserve and kind of enrich this meadow environment along here. And then what we've done is some of the infrastructure, which would be drain fields for sanitary sewer system that we're developing, those we have moved completely out of the western part of the project, and they are now on the east side of the stream. And this stream is a recirculating situation where the lower pond will pump that back up to the upper pond, and it'll be flowing year round down to the lower pond here. What we've done through here, which is kind of the book cover to the interior roads, is this would be more significant mounding through here and through here, and that would buffer the actual development in behind here. And these are set up to have nice view sheds. The reductions that we've had here is that if you look at our cumulative open space and pond areas and trails and landscape areas, at the first go around, we were at about 50% or 56%. And we've increased that by about 10% so that our open space composite with the landscaping and et cetera is now at 65%. So our development footprint is not only did we pull the density down from 298 units to 231 units, but we did, as Bob said, we shifted our density and reduced the casitas, what we're now calling casita lots and envelopes, I should say, by 54% from what we had the original time. And then we've increased these cabin structures. And we do have included in our application a very detailed set of plans for what we intend to do with these resort resident structures. And I would invite you to look at those. I think they're a real nice looking structure, and will be, again, the mention of affordability was made, and I think this entire project will have the potential to have some affordable units that will be part of the four season scenario that we're trying to develop here. The meadow conservation area was a very important kind of refocus for us, and we have pushed as much as we could. We have pushed the structural development of this project to the east as much as we can, maintaining, however, the buffer that we kind of had all along the Forest Service boundary here. And then again, we're kind of limiting our access into the Forest Service to areas where there are already developed trails. And we did consult with the Forest Service on that the first time around. Other than that, I'd be happy to entertain any other questions. I don't know that I covered everything that you asked, but would be happy to do that.
Mr. Lutz, there was a question posed by Commissioner Williams about whether these units would be heated or not. Could you address that? And then
Yes.
Commissioner Best, go ahead after he answers.
Yeah, happy to do that. The casita sites, the prerequisite of someone purchasing a casita is that it in fact is going to be built on every one of these casita lots. So that's a prerequisite to the occupation of those lots. As was mentioned, the casita will be owned fee simple. The area that each of those, call them envelopes for the casitas, will be leased. So there will be a concrete pad on that envelope that will be next to the casita, and that will be available for RVs or larger camp vehicles and that sort of thing. But that's the ownership condition. Likewise, a resort residence will have a structure on it and a driveway, and the envelope itself will be leased. The structure itself will be owned.
And will those structures have heat?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't answer that question, I guess. Yes, all of it is 4-season and both will be heated, correct.
Commissioner Best, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Great. Well, thanks for meeting with us. One issue is I think aren't there big highway signs on this property? They're going to go, right?
They are going to go. They're as soon as we hopefully receive approval. We had agreed to get those offsite within a year period of time.
That's a great selling point for me. I mentioned 15 items that we've worked up. We've got a list of items, and there may be a few more or less, but over the last year, we've done, I'm going to say close to dozens, maybe certainly more than a dozen campgrounds and RV resorts. They're really a popular item now. And we've found that offsite impacts are extremely important. So I hope you'll look over that list with Mr. Short. That for me is a very important list. One of the big issues is these modern OHVs, off-highway vehicles. We tend to call them razors. I guess that's like Kleenex, that's the most popular brand. And they've gone from little, 20-mile-an-hour four-wheelers 30 years ago, and now they're 60-mile-an-hour things with roll cages. And the impact on adjacent neighborhoods and the forest from these things is really significant. So looking ahead to tone down that impact is extremely important. And I know they're very popular, and it's a tough situation. They're very popular, and they're also very damaging unless their use and the control is very disciplined. Another interesting thing, as we've been talking about heat, is that amazingly, tomorrow evening at 5:30 p.m., the City of Flagstaff is having a seminar on heat pumps. I'm sure you know that heat pumps are air conditioners that go both ways. They provide heat and air conditioning, and they're electric. That's consistent with our energy goals in the county and the comprehensive plan, trying to use more electricity, lower our carbon footprint. It would be great to see a strong electrical presence here as opposed to 250 propane tanks. I will try to get the link to Mr. Short if you're interested. What the bottom line is that heat pumps are sort of culturally missing from Arizona. They're used in Vermont. New York City just cut off gas to new construction. They're used in Europe for sort of, construction culture reasons. We don't see many heat pumps here. The city is trying to remedy that with both a meeting tomorrow night, which is mostly for customers, and then other meetings for contractors to try to make the transition from gas to electric. So that's just happens to be serendipitous that tomorrow evening there is that presentation. And the big thing for me is driving by the highway and looking. One of the big things is driving by the highway and looking at this, and it looks like you're being sensitive to that, and I appreciate that very much. Certainly, this meadow is in any riparian area in northern Arizona is precious, and everything we can do to protect it. would be appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I just
Vice
wanted
Chair
to,
Walters?
I'd just like to state that I understand and heard what Commissioner Best says, and I'm on the other side of the fence from that. I believe that the propane and natural gas is a very efficient use, and we have been at Northern Arizona Building Association have been working on some educational materials as well. So it's not all one and all the other. There's different ways of approaching this, but I just want to throw that out there. Thank you.
And I'll say that heat pumps give you AC, and it's getting hotter. So.
Noted.
Mhm. Okay, I do not see anybody else's hand raised or unmuted. So thank you for joining us this evening, Mr. Lutz, and offering that information. And with that, Mr. Short, would you continue on with the study session?
Yes, Madam Chair, I will. I'll go ahead and I guess I don't really need to share my screen again. So the next case is that we actually only have one other case, and that's an administrative case for renewal. Are there any questions about that? Or would you like to move on? Actually, Kelly has that case and she's ready to present a little bit on it, if you would like.
Mr. Short, if I am not seeing Commissioner Best, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take it down.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I just wanted to be sure you didn't want to speak to this case. Mr. Short, not seeing any questions, and I think that we can make the assumption that if it's on administrative renewal, it complies with conditions previously imposed, and there have been no complaints. So I think that we can move forward without a presentation by Ms. Bingham. And so let's go ahead and go to the Community Development Department update, please.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so we have not, the county has not re-advertised the Assistant Director Planning Manager position because there's just been a shortage of qualified applicants. It's difficult to go out and go through that entire process when there aren't qualified applicants. So I think Jay is reassessing how we're going to look at that along with human resources. I don't know if Jay is here to speak to that. Don't see him, but he could be. All right, and then number 2, the county has actually moved to phase 4 operations regarding COVID. It was stuck in the same place. We were stuck in the same place for a long time. So that means that staff and visitors to county facilities are no longer required to wear masks. We, however, do not know when in-person hybrid hearings will resume. We haven't heard from county management on that yet. I talked to Jay about it before this agenda went out, and he didn't have any information on that either. Any questions on those 2 items?
I'm not seeing any, Mr. Short. Go ahead and bump to number 3.
Okay. And the next, actually 4, I'll let Melissa speak to. I believe she's still here. Melissa, are you still here?
She had to go.
Okay, she went ahead and went. Okay, never mind.
So she'll be back shortly.
Okay.
Sure.
I understood she was going home, but I didn't think it was until a little later. Okay, so the Doty Park Timberland Fernwood Area Plan Update Committee met on March 10th. And then finalize the goals and policies. That's really good news. So we have an open house planned for April 7th, and that will be in about a week. So it's coming up real quick. The county is a partner in the Route 66 Brownfields EPA grant. The grant is managed by NACOG. Property owners are being solicited for projects. So please contact Melissa if you have questions on that. Staff is currently working with the city of Flagstaff on an update process for the Flagstaff regional plan. You can also talk to Melissa about that one. At this point, we have, I think it's getting a little bit more set. We'll see, but at this point, we have a City of Flagstaff Planning Commission joint session with this commission. It's been tentatively scheduled for April 27th at 3 p.m. So that would be at next month's, basically their study session. Your study session, it would start early at 3 o'clock. So keep in mind that. And we'll let you know on that agenda if that is actually going to happen. I believe it will. Any questions on any of those things?
I'm not seeing any, Mr. Short.
Okay, thanks, Madam Chair. All right.
Yeah,
and-
I'm sorry, Mr. Short. I just wanted to mention that at noon on Monday, there is a regional plan meeting about water. And I've been going to these things. They're short. You can do it over lunch. And there are a lot of really top folks there from the city and the county. And there haven't been many people showing up. You can ask all the questions you want and get all the information that you want. So I'd encourage people to attend. I think you can just, I think if you just Googled City of Flagstaff Regional Plan, you would find an invitation to those. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Best. And that is true. I have not been able to attend those. Mondays tend to be very busy for me, but I understand those have been very interesting, very enlightening. I see that Melissa has joined us. Melissa, do you have any comments on any of these items? We talked about the Donny Park, Timberland, Fernwood area plan, the Brownfields grant, the regional plan, and the joint session with City of Flagstaff Commission.
No, I think you've covered it unless there are any questions. Thanks for covering those topics for me. And I'm happy to send anybody a link to the regional plan website so you can sign up for the snapshot webinars.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. All right, any other questions before we move on? Okay.
I'm not seeing any. So go ahead and hit the Board of Supervisors update.
Okay, so the only thing we have on this is the Tall Tales Ranch subdivision amendment is scheduled to be heard by the Board of Supervisors on April 7th or April 12th, excuse me. It looks like they're already ready to go to final plat, so that that subdivision should be going forward really soon for development. And with that, I realize this has been, we have quite a bit of time for things today. We have actually quite a bit of time for this staff commission roundtable. If anyone has any questions or any topics they would like to discuss. And we can also
Mr.
take a
Short,
long break. You can take a long break.
I
if
know,
you
but
want.
I am not seeing any mics unmuted or hands raised. So I'm going to go ahead and say that there is nothing for commission and staff roundtable at this time. So yeah, this is going to give us about a 45-minute break. So why don't we go ahead and leave now and meet back at 5:30?
Sounds good. Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll see everyone at 5:30.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Mr. Short.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay.
Madam Chair. Yes, Madam
Hi,
Chair.
Mr. Short. I just wanted to be sure that you're ready and ready to go.
We are ready, Madam Chair. Thanks.
All right. Okay, Mr. Short, I show 5:30, so I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order.
Thank you, Madam
I'm going to
Chair.
first start with the meeting rules and procedures. Welcome to the March 30th, 2022 meeting of the Coconino County Planning and Zoning Commission. Cases will be heard in the order they appear on the agenda. Following the staff presentation, the applicant and/or the applicant's representative may address the commission. As an applicant, if you agree with the staff report and have no additional information, please feel free to keep your comments brief. Any relevant comments are welcome. Following the applicant's presentation, I will make a call to the public. If you wish to address this case, please state your name and address. We ask that your comments be limited to 3 minutes or less. Comments must be relevant to the case. Please address all comments to the commission. No matter how strongly you may feel about the case, all comments must be polite and courteous. After all interested public have spoken, the public comment portion will be closed. Discussion will then take place amongst commissioners. Decisions of this commission regarding any zone change or preliminary subdivision plat approval are referred to the Board of Supervisors as a recommendation. All other case decisions are binding unless appealed to the Board of Supervisors. If you disagree with the commission's decision, you have 15 days to appeal. Please contact staff at the Community Development Office for appeal procedures. Due to the virtual nature of this meeting, I will be doing a roll call vote of the commissioners to ensure accuracy for the record. Please mute your speakers and turn off your camera. And with that, thank you for joining us this evening and actively participating in our county planning. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Short, would you please lead us?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the February 23rd, 2022 minutes. If there are no corrections or modifications, I will accept a motion in a second, please.
I make a motion for approval of the minutes.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Walters and a second by Commissioner Ruggles for approval of the February 23rd, 2022 minutes. All in favor, please say aye. Commissioner Best,
Aye.
Commissioner Burton,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Abstain.
Commissioner Ruggles,
Aye.
Commissioner Clifford,
Aye.
Commissioner Walters,
Aye.
and this is Chair Ontiveros. I also vote aye. The motion passes unanimously and the minutes of February 23rd, 2022 are approved. The next item is on the consent agenda. It is case number CUP 19043. We can go ahead and move to a motion in a second if there are no questions or comments, and I'm not seeing anyone's hand raised.
I make a motion on the consent agenda for CUP-19-043.
And I will second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion made by Commissioner Walters and seconded by Commissioner Ruggles for approval of the consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye. Commissioner Best,
Aye.
Commissioner Burton,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Commissioner Ruggles,
Aye.
Commissioner Clifford,
Aye.
Vice Chair Walters.
Aye.
This is Chair Ontiveros. I also vote aye. The motion passes unanimously. The first item on our public hearings tonight is case number CUP 22-003.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, our first case this evening is Parker Storage Container. The applicant for this case and the owner of the property is Connie L. Parker. The parcel size is 9.54 acres. It's a legal non-conforming lot in the G zone. And she is requesting a conditional use permit for her 8x40 metal storage container. As you can see here, the subject property is in Red Lake. It's a few miles off the 64. If you can see my cursor and the blue arrow, this is where the property is at. It's relatively remote. About half of the properties in this area have homes or have been developed. The larger structure you can see in this aerial photo is the home, and then the smaller one is a garage. The metal storage container is right next to the garage, as you'll see in some photos in a moment. This was previously approved as CUP 1159. That CUP has lapsed, and that's why we're hearing it again this evening. The container is just used for storage and personal items. And here's a photo of it here. Now, in staff's opinion, this is very well blended with the natural environment. As you can see, the color matches the natural landscape pretty closely. And there are a couple of trees that have been planted in front of it. This photo was taken from Clark Lane. So you can see from the road, it is actually pretty difficult to see the storage container, in my opinion. We'll look at it again in some more photos. Here you can see on their property, the storage container with the garage behind it, and some storage behind the container that you weren't able to see from Clark Road. No public comments have been received on this case. And I wanted to show the conditions of the previous resolution. Most of these have been retained in the report, but I want to call out that the building permit condition was not retained. This is because that's no longer required by the building division. It's not something that they currently issue permits for, so it did not make sense to carry that one over. Our analysis is that the container meets all requirements of section 3.10. You should have seen that in your packet if you wanted to refer to it yourself. The site has been well maintained, and again, the color blends pretty well with the environment, and the container is screened. Here are the proposed conditions. The container box shall meet all standards specified in section 3.10 with the exception of size. And we are not putting a limit on this renewal, and it shall just be subject to a zoning code violation if any of these conditions are violated. Are there any questions from the commission?
Ms. Bingham, I am not seeing any, so I am going to ask if the applicant is present tonight. Ms. Bingham, do you see her on the list of participants?
Madam Chair, let me check. I have not seen her hop on yet, but let me just verify that.
Okay, and she's not required to be here, but I certainly didn't want to miss her. Double check.
Absolutely. I see 2 phone numbers. I'm not sure if that could possibly be her, but I don't believe it is.
Okay.
I think it's safe to say that she is not with us this evening.
Okay, all right. Well then, not seeing any questions, the applicant not being present, I'm going to ask if there is anyone in the public that wishes to address the commission on this case this evening. If so, please raise your hand or unmute your mic and I will see you. And I am not seeing any, so I will go ahead and close it to the public and open it up at discussion level. Commissioner Best, would you please start us tonight?
I think I can make the findings on this. It looks like it blends in pretty well, and it's a fairly rural area with not many people around it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Burton?
I can make the findings.
Okay, Commissioner Williams?
I can make the findings as well.
Okay, Commissioner Ruggles?
Okay, I remember this case rather well from November of 2011. I can definitely make the findings as we did then. And I would have to add that we were quite surprised and very pleased with how well this container blended in with the residents in the garage and the rest of the property. And it's even better screened now than it was then. So well done.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Clifford.
I can make the findings.
Okay, Vice Chair Walters.
I agree with my fellow commissioners. I can easily make the findings.
Okay, and this is Chair Ontiveros, and I'm just going to concur with Commissioner Ruggles' comments that, I mean, this is a poster of what a storage container should look like. It is that well done. So with that, let's go ahead and move to a motion in second, please.
Hey,
Go ahead.
I'll go ahead and make a motion. I move for approval of case number CUP-22-003 with conditions as stated in the staff analysis.
I second that.
Okay, I've got a motion by Commissioner Ruggles, a second by Vice Chair Walters for approval of CUP 22-003. All in favor, please say aye. Commissioner Best?
Aye.
Commissioner Burton?
Aye.
Commissioner Williams?
Aye.
Commissioner Ruggles?
Aye.
Commissioner Clifford?
Aye.
Vice Chair Walters?
Aye.
And this is Chair Ontiveros. I also vote aye. Case number CUP 22-003 has been approved unanimously. The next item on the agenda is case number AZ-22-011.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. This is Zach Schwartz with planning staff. Are you able to hear me and are you able to see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Then I'll proceed. This is case AZ-22-011. This is for the Munns Park Batch Plant Temporary Use Permit. The property owner of the subject property is MBC Properties. The applicant is William Charles Construction. The applicant's representative is Jennifer Anderson of Anderson Environmental. And the zoning for the property is CG 10,000. That's general commercial with a 10,000 square foot parcel size minimum. The subject project area is 3 parcels that total to 3.57 acres. And this request is for a temporary use permit for a cement batch plant. Here's a vicinity map. So this is the Munns Park area. Here's Highway 17, just off the Pinewood Boulevard exit on the 17. There are a couple of gas stations here, a restaurant, and a real estate office. Just to the south of that, we have the 3 subject properties, and adjacent to the east, we have some open space for the Pinewood Golf Club. Here is an area where you can see a little bit better. Here's Pinewood and the access easements coming to these properties comes through the real estate property here. So there is an existing office space here. This was a nursery office. And then these properties are vacant, but they've been covered with asphalt milling since I think the 90s. For description of the use, this is a batch plant related to an ADOT highway construction project, and specifically it's for installation of ducts on the shoulder of I-17 from milepost 296 to milepost 340. So the work includes trenching in the shoulders, installing the ducts, and then backfilling with the cement that is produced on the property. The project includes storage of construction vehicles, raw material piles, and the operation of the cement batch plant, of course. There is a meeting space and restroom. They're actually using the former nursery and home garden building on that northernmost parcel for those uses there. And this use has actually been operational since October. The applicant, I think, found out in February that this process was required in order to conduct the use. So they pretty promptly applied for this. And here's just the site plan. So you can see here's that office, the laydown yard, and there's the batch plant located here. I took some photos and these are included in the staff report, but here's what that office building looks like. Here's what the actual batch plant equipment looks like. You'll see it's on wheels, so it's pretty mobile. And there are some storage containers in the back here. And then there are various construction vehicles associated with the batch plant that are parked on the subject property. And here's just some more pictures. So adjacent to this is the Highway I-17 right of way. There are some spools here, and then you can see the raw material piles as well. I just wanted to go through with the commission. There are performance standards that are required for all temporary use permits, and I wanted to go through how this project complies with those. So as far as noise, it's a requirement that noise shall not be generated by any use to the point of disturbing the peace, quiet, and comfort of the neighborhood. So this proposed use has the potential to be noisy, but the location is in the commercial node of Munns Park, where the uses are compatible and the noise impacts won't be an issue here. As far as parking, you saw all the space where there's plenty of room for parking on the property. As far as sanitation, staff talked with environmental quality staff, and the use of the restroom for this type of use is perfectly approved. No problem there. There are no signs associated with this request, and there is a limit for signage, but none is requested. As far as lighting, there wasn't anything in the application about any evening hours for this type of use, but staff has recommended a condition that any lighting would need to be fully shielded and that illumination would be confined to the subject property boundaries. And as far as any other permits and documentation needed from any other jurisdictions, the applicant already has approval from the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality for the use. I'm not aware if the applicant has a floodplain permit. There is some floodplain on the property, but because of the temporary nature of the use, it shouldn't be an issue, just that the applicant needs to apply for that floodplain permit from the Community Development Engineering Division. So that is conditioned in this report. As far as public participation, staff notified property owners within 300 feet of the subject property, and there weren't any comments or questions received. So with that, staff is recommending approval of case AZ-22-011, subject to the 7 conditions of the staff report. And I'm happy to take any questions from the commission at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schwartz. I am not seeing any commissioners looking to ask questions. So with that, I'm going to ask if the applicant is present tonight. Mr. Schwartz, do you see them on the participant? Oh, wait, we have Jennifer Anderson.
Yes.
Ms. Anderson, if you would, please state your name and address for the record, and I will just ask if you have received the staff report, if you've read it, and if you agree with the conditions it contains.
Sure. My name is Jennifer Anderson. I'm with Anderson Environmental, 201 North 6th Street in Rockford, Illinois, 61107. I've received the staff report and of course agree with it. We also have on the call representatives from William Charles Construction. They've received the same packet and presumably agree with it also. If you'd like to ask them to say so, that's fine with me as well. We've been very fortunate to work with Coconino County, and you've been so good to us. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson, for that. As their representative, I feel it's sufficient that you have spoken to this. I'm going to ask if there are any commissioners that have any questions for Ms. Anderson at this time. Seeing none, I'm going to ask if there is anyone in the public that would like to address the commission on this case this evening. If so, please raise your hand or unmute. Not seeing any, I'm going to go ahead and close it, close the public comment section and open it to commission discussion. Commissioner Best.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This looks like an appropriate use. We certainly need the upgrades on the highway. The property is seems to have a pretty good surface on it, which was an issue I wondered about. Apparently, the noise is not an issue, and since it's temporary, I have no problem with it. I can make the findings.
Thank you. Commissioner Burton.
Yeah, given this is a temporary use, I can make the findings. I don't have a problem with it.
Okay, Commissioner Williams.
I too can make the findings and think this is a fine use.
Okay, Commissioner Ruggles.
I can also make the findings for this temporary use permit.
Okay, Commissioner Clifford.
I can make the findings.
Thank you. Vice Chair Walters.
I went down and looked at the site. I think that the asphalt millings are in good shape. I've been watching the work that they've been doing along the freeway. They're very clean and organized, and I can definitely support this.
Okay, thank you. And this is Chair Ontiveros. I concur with my fellow commissioners' comments, and I also can make the findings. With that, let's go ahead and move to a motion in a second, please.
I make a motion for approval of AZ-22-011.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion by Vice Chair Walters, a second by Commissioner Burton. Commissioner Best. All in favor, please say aye. Commissioner Best.
Aye.
Commissioner Burton.
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Ruggles.
Aye.
Commissioner Clifford.
Aye.
Vice Chair Walters.
Aye.
This is Chair Ontiveros. I also vote aye. AZ-22-011 passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is case number ZC-22-001.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Can you hear me and see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, we can.
This case is a Swaggart zone change, ZC-22-001. In this case, the application, the property owner is Clifton and Roberta Swaggart Revocable Trust. The applicant is Clifton Swaggart. Current zoning is CG 10,000, and the requested zoning is RM10A. The size of the parcel is 1 acre, and it is located at 1080 Pond Circle in Forest Lakes. This is a vicinity map showing the subject property. You can see Forest Lakes here along Highway 260, and that is the location subject property amongst other commercial and kind of mixed zones right here. And this is an aerial photo showing the subject property. As you can see, there are already 3 properties. There's actually a line right there that's difficult to see, but there are 3 properties here, all developed with cabins. And there's another commercial property here. This is the subject property, which would like to have the same zoning, the RM10A zone, as these properties have. These are the reasons for the zone change as stated in the narrative, in the applicant's narrative. Basically, the topography on the site is steep, making access from the highway difficult, and the adjacent properties already have homes on them. And he has had other proposals, other commercial proposals, and they have not supported those proposals. I haven't heard what those are exactly, but he would like to move forward with the zone change to residential to match the neighborhood. All right, this is Pond Circle. And to the right, you can see the subject property. You can see it does go uphill steeply, probably a little steeper than it looks in this photograph. And this is the subject property from the corner of State Route 260, goes through like this. Pond Circle goes off like this. So it's on the corner right here. And this is the flat area on top of the property. Once you get up off of that slope, then it flattens out and creates a nice pad for construction. In terms of public participation, the applicant held a virtual neighborhood meeting on December the 30th, 2021. No one attended the meeting. He did receive one letter of support citing similar zone changes in the area. Staff has not received any comments on this application. These are the findings of fact for a zone change, and I've discussed those in the staff report, and I will discuss them here as well with the staff analysis. The zone change is consistent with the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance. The RM10A zone is consistent with the other neighbors in Pond Circle. Topographical constraints make commercial uses difficult to develop. And the potential impacts, of course, from commercial development is reduced. It's a lot less impact to have residences than it is a commercial development. So this is basically a down zone. And because of that, staff also does not recommend any conditions be applied to it, that the RM10A standards are applied straight up, and the applicant can develop a property in any way allowed under that 10A zone, RM10A zone. And with that, staff can make the findings and recommends the commission forwards a recommendation of approval of ZC 22001 to the Board of Supervisors. And with that, I'll take any questions from the commission.
Okay, Mr. Short, I am not seeing any hands raised by the commissioners. So I am going to ask if the applicant or the applicant's representative is present tonight. And I believe Mr. Schweigert is. Mr. Schweigert, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask you this. First, I would like you to state your name and address for the record. And I would just like to ask if you did receive the staff report and if you agree with staff's recommendation in your case.
Yes, my name is Clifton Schweigert. I live at 1296 Sheep Springs Road in Forest Lakes, Arizona. And yes, I did receive the staff's packet.
Okay, and you agree with the recommendation? I'm assuming that you do.
I do agree with the staff's recommendations, yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schweigert. Let me ask if there are any commissioners that have any questions for you. If so, please raise your hand. And I am not seeing any, so I'm going to ask if there is anyone in the public who wishes to address this case, to address the commission this evening on this case. Not seeing any. I'm going to close the public comment portion and open it to the commission. Commissioner Best.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know this area reasonably well. Been going up here for many, many decades, actually. I think this is appropriate. It's a down zoning. I don't think that this is not the first commercial property that we've done this with over the years in the Forest Lakes area. And I think it's going to be a boon to the neighbors, and they probably need some housing up there. So this will help with that issue. So I can support this.
Thank you. Commissioner Burton.
I think it's a completely appropriate request and I see no problems with it and I can make the findings.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams.
Yeah, I concur with my fellow commissioners who've spoken on this. I can make the findings and I think it's great.
Thank you. Commissioner Ruggles.
Well, I'll have to say that Commissioner Best summed it up for me extremely well. Been out there a number of times before, and over the years, we've had similar zone changes to deal with for the same reasons. It is very appropriate in this case, and I can make the findings for this zone change.
Thank you. Commissioner Clifford.
I can make the findings for it.
Okay, Vice Chair Walters.
I agree with my colleagues. I can make the findings.
Okay, and this is Chair Ontiveros, and as stated, I concur with my fellow commissioners on this and can make the findings. With that, let's go ahead and move to a motion in a second, please.
I make a motion to approve ZC-22-001 as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Walters and a second by Commissioner Clifford to recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors for ZC 22-001. All in favor, please say aye. Commissioner Best,
Aye.
Commissioner Burton,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Commissioner Ruggles,
Aye.
Commissioner Clifford,
Aye.
Vice Chair Walters.
Aye.
This is Chair Ontiveros. I also vote aye. The motion to recommend approval of ZC 22001 passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is case number AM-21-002.
Thank you, Chair Antiveros. This is Melissa Shaw, and Marty, if you could enable screen sharing, I can share my presentation.
You should have it now.
Thank you. Did the screen display?
Yes, we can see it and hear you.
Thank you very much. This is Melissa Shaw with Planning and Zoning, and I'm here to present this amendment to the floodplain overlay district. The applicant is the Community Development Department, and we are requesting an amendment to change the zoning ordinance essentially to remove the floodplain management overlay district from the zoning ordinance at the recommendation of Arizona Department of Water Resources, so that that will then become a standalone document. So there, as you can see on the screen, there are 4 specific sections to the zoning ordinance that requires amending. The first section would be to remove this as an overlay district from the table of zones. The second one would be to add a reference to the separate ordinance, which would be called the Coconino County Floodplain Regulations. The third amendment would be to amend Chapter 2, the zoning districts, and remove Section 2.16b, the floodplain management overlay zone, entirely from the zoning ordinance. And finally, the fourth change would be to amend Chapter 6 and remove the floodplain management definitions from that chapter. Looking at the findings, staff found that we can make all of the findings. The yellow highlight is, I wanted to note that in the staff report, outdated language was used, and that this is the current language for this middle finding, that the change will not be detrimental to public health, safety, comfort, convenience, and welfare. The way the finding is worded in your staff report, that the change is in the interest of or will further the public health, safety, comfort, convenience, and welfare. We want you to know that we did countywide newspaper publication notifying the community of this change. We have not received any public comments in regard to this proposed amendment, and staff does recommend that the commission then forward this case onto the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation for approval. And just as a side note here, then the flood control district would be looking simultaneously at the May 10th hearing to adopt the new floodplain, Coconino County floodplain management regulations. So the county would not be without a floodplain management regulation at any period of time. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Shaw. Any questions for Ms. Shaw from the commissioners? Okay, I am not seeing any since basically you are the applicant. Hold on, Vice Chair Walters has unmuted. Vice Chair Walters, please go ahead.
I apologize for being late. I would just like to know more about how this is going to work and in some detail. Is John Carr available?
Don't.
Yes, hello.
Hi, John. Go ahead, please.
Hi, John.
Hello, how are you?
Hey, how is this going to affect a normal application for a project? How will that change?
I'm not seeing any change. Well, let me back up just a hair. Another part of the reason this had to happen is because whenever a community adopts a new floodplain map, and that's the Kachina Village map. So that's what made this, wanting to do this minor updates, but there won't be any changes. It's just clarification of language.
Okay, well, that's what I wanted to clarify. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carr. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. So I am going to ask if there is anyone in the public that wishes to address the commission on this case this evening. If so, please raise your hand or unmute. Not seeing any. I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment section and open it at commission level. Commissioner Best.
Madam Chair, I can make the findings on this.
Commissioner Burton.
I can as well.
Commissioner Williams.
I can as well.
Okay, Commissioner Ruggles.
I can make findings for this change as well.
Okay, Commissioner Clifford.
I can make the findings for the change.
Thank you, Vice Chair Walters.
I too can make the findings. Thank you.
All right, and this is Chair Ontiveros, again concurring with my fellow commissioners and can make the findings. So I will accept a motion for recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, please.
Okay, I'll go ahead and do that. I'd like to make a motion that we make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors for approval of AM-21-002.
I second that.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Ruggles and a second by Commissioner Vice Chair Walters to recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors for AM-21-002. All in favor, please say aye. Commissioner Best.
Aye.
Commissioner Burton.
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Ruggles.
Aye.
Commissioner Clifford.
Aye.
Vice Chair Walters.
Aye.
And this is Chair Ontiveros. I also vote aye. AM-21-002 will be forwarded to the Board of Supervisors with the recommendation of approval. And the last case on our agenda this evening is case number AM-20-003.
Thank you, Chair Ontiveros. This is Melissa Shaw. I'll also be presenting this case. And I will share screen. Thank you. Did that screen display?
Yep, we can see it and we can hear you. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much. This is presenting another zoning ordinance amendment to, in this case, add a new section for the utility scale renewable energy ordinance AM-20-003. Again, Coconino County Community Development is the applicant, and we are requesting zoning ordinance amendment to amend Chapter 3, Special Uses and Conditions, to add a new section 3.19 that will provide performance standards and application requirements for developing utility scale renewable energy projects, including wind, solar, and biomass. And also to amend Chapter 5 Administration, Section 5.7.B.4.B to add additional waivers that the Planning Commission may grant for utility scale renewable energy projects to include performance standards between zones, audible noise, underground placement of collection lines, and shadow flicker. And finally, to amend Chapter 6 definitions to include new terms associated with utility scale renewable energy projects, and to also update existing definitions. There's some of this information that the commission has already seen. We wanted to go ahead though and explain some of the background as to why we've embarked on this project. As you may be aware, the county's comprehensive plan gives specific direction to develop a utility scale energy ordinance to give developers and the county appropriate direction, clear direction on appropriate siting of these projects. We've focused specifically on solar, wind, and biomass. We've seen project applications coming in for those projects in particular. We also know through various mapping tools that there is potential in Coconino County to generate solar and wind energy. And with that, that's why the energy developers have taken advantage of that potential to site some of the facilities in our county. We know that with biomass energy projects that can help to support forest restoration by providing feedstock for those utilities. These projects also provide a means for large landholders and ranches, landscapes and ranches intact, because it provides an income stream and then avoids the need to develop those in other smaller sections. As you know, we've seen project applications for these facilities increasing as conditional use permits. And then also some additional drivers for this project is you may be familiar with Arizona Public Service has a decarbonization plan. I believe by the year 2050, they plan to provide all their energy off of renewable resources. And along with that, then the Navajo generating station closure has opened up additional capacity on the transmission lines for more energy. This is just a zoomed in view of kind of the middle part of the county where you can see all of the renewable energy projects that we know about to date are being located. We do have now the ability to map these. So this is a tool that we will be using when and if we have future projects come in the door to help us understand the overall impacts of these. And so again, specifically, we are addressing wind, solar, and biomass with this new ordinance. And you can see the image on the right is a view from Perrin Wind Farm, which is our one currently operating system. And we wanted to talk a bit about the resources that we've used to develop this ordinance. And we have used the county comprehensive plan. It has an energy element in it, as well as an appendix with a lot of detail that really provided the foundation for creating the elements of this amendment. We also have experience with county approved projects and have used those conditions to, again, help craft the standards in the ordinance. We've researched best practices from across the country and looked at other ordinances and pulled from those what we felt were relevant to Coconino County. But then finally, and probably most importantly, we've had the good fortune to have a large advisory group that has put a lot of time and effort into looking at the drafts and the different iterations as this project has evolved. And this has been a volunteer group. It's been informal and organic. It's just grown as the word spread, but we did make some specific contacts, but these were not appointed people. These are contacts that we have been able to make just through partly word of mouth and partly through recommendations. So the sample of the groups represented is just shown on the bottom right, but I think we have a few people here with us tonight, and I just wanted to recognize those people. I saw Bill Auberly, Thad Johnson, and I believe Michael McCauley. I see a Perrin Ranch name on our participant list. I believe that's Mike McCauley. But from the Planning Commission, then Commissioner Best and Commissioner Ruggles were also very involved and regular participants in over 18 meetings that it took to get to this point. And then also on staff, Jessica Simmons, Bob Short, Kelly Bingham, and Zach Schwartz, they've all participated in preparing this ordinance. Just wanted to review again the major topics of discussion that have come up throughout the drafting process. We've had quite a bit of discussion about visual impacts, primarily from wind turbines, how to analyze those and how to try best to mitigate those. And the ordinance then is written around these topics, and the standards are written to address these. We've had quite a bit of discussion regarding what is the appropriate setback for wind turbines from non-participating residential properties, and I have an image to show in a moment. We've talked a lot about disturbance to these sites and what that means to native vegetation, how grading would also disturb native vegetation and potentially promote weed proliferation. So the ordinance is written, drafted to preserve native vegetation, preserve soil, minimize grading, minimize weed growth. And there's been a lot of discussion about this idea of agrivoltaics, which you may have seen images of crops being grown among and underneath solar panels, realizing that may not apply so much in Coconino County. We've at least had quite a robust discussion as to the applicability here. We've also had a lot of very detailed discussion about wildlife impacts, the standards that would need to be written to protect wildlife corridors and habitats, and that includes standards for fencing. We've discussed what cultural impacts might occur because of the large landscape scale of these projects and how to connect better with Native American tribes, but also to get early information early in the project to understand what resources are on site and how best to mitigate impacts to those. The commission, during your retreat and other meetings, you brought up the idea of cumulative impacts. And so a definition for cumulative impacts has been included in this, as well as specific standards and requirements to address cumulative impacts when it comes to visual impacts and also wildlife impacts. And then finally, there's been a lot of discussion in terms of decommissioning these projects when they're decommissioned, and then how the county can best receive financial securities to assure that we will be able to actually address the situation if a project does become abandoned. So again, a little more specific in terms of the requested changes to the zoning ordinance. To Chapter 3, this special uses and conditions, this would be that new section 3.19, where the utility scale renewable energy system standards are written, and these would continue to be addressed and approved as conditional use permits with the Planning and Zoning Commission. Currently, we've been permitting these projects as a current land use called utility facility. And that would not change. What we've done is we've updated that definition of utility facility to include specific types of renewable energy utilities, the solar, the wind, and the biomass projects. So it's a refinement and an expansion of that current land use. Again, to Chapter 5 waivers, we would be requesting to amend that to allow the commission authority to waive audible noise standards, to waive the requirement to put collection lines underground when that's appropriate, to waive the standard for shadow flicker, and then also performance standard between zones. And I'll talk a bit more about what those standards are in a second. And then finally, again, we're updating Chapter 6, the definitions. So we'll talk a bit more about the structure of the draft. It follows the same format as the rest of the zoning ordinance. It opens with a purpose statement, And the purpose statement is contains a lot of the desires that were written into the comprehensive plan in terms of appropriate siting of these projects, promoting reliable clean energy sources by giving the clear standards to encourage systems that preserve the county's highly valued intact natural landscapes, and also to prevent private lands from fragmenting, to offer private landholders options for economic diversity and stability, to help mitigate climate change impacts, all the while maintaining and protecting wildlife populations and wildlife corridors, view sheds, vegetative communities, dark skies, and air quality. So that is written right into the purpose statement at the introduction of the ordinance. And so tracking along with that list of issues that we talked about a bit earlier, there are some specific standards that might be useful to think about. For audible noise, there's a standard that would address noise. The noise is primarily generated from wind turbines, and the standard that was written into the ordinance is 50 decibels measured at the property line. And that measurement is required to be conducted by a qualified expert. We have standards written in to address cultural, archaeological, cultural, and historic resources, and in particular, requiring preliminary studies come in with our pre-application application. And actually, there is quite a long list of pre-application requirements that is really much more than what we have written into our current code. So these are specific to these types of projects that we're asking for detailed information right up front so that staff can begin to analyze these early in the process. There is a standard that would require biomass plants to provide a preliminary emissions analysis. And this was important to the observatory so they can have an idea of what particulates might go in the air that could potentially impact their work. There is a standard in there for lighting. There's anything that is over 200 feet in height does require aviation warning lights from the FAA. And the standard that was written into the ordinance is that those be radar activated. In terms of shadow flicker, just to briefly touch on what that is, shadow flicker is the strobe-like effect of sun passing through wind turbine blades. And the standard written into the ordinance is that it not exceed 30 hours per year, impacting either a non-participating property owner or a roadway. And then in terms of vegetation and weeds, there are quite a few sections that address vegetation and weeds, including minimizing grading impacts, preserving native vegetation as much as possible, also revegetating disturbed areas, and then ongoing and long-term monitoring and mitigation of any weeds that may occur. Impacts in terms of visual resources is addressed by requiring visual simulations for all of these projects. And then there's also requirements to underground collection lines between wind turbines, for instance, and also between other systems until they have to come out of the ground to connect into the main transmission lines. So visual impacts is one of the main topics, or rather one of the main standards that is being proposed by the ordinance. Water is addressed somewhat, and it really, you can think of it mainly being addressed in terms of what is not going to be permitted by this proposed ordinance and the types of solar facilities that utilize a lot of water. I believe they're called concentrated solar facilities. Those are actually not being proposed as permitted types of facilities with this ordinance. And then finally, with wildlife, there are quite a few standards that require that a project developer look at wildlife corridors, that also look at guidelines specifically written for these types of projects by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, by Arizona Game and Fish, and then the county's wildlife planner would also be looking at these. So the ordinance refers very specifically by name to those guidelines to direct developers to look at those right from the beginning. This is an image just to display some of the visual simulations that we would expect to see. This was, you may have seen this because this was submitted to you with your Babbitt Ranch Energy Center project. Image off of Highway 180 to wind turbines about 6 miles in the distance. So this is the type of simulation that is required for all of these projects. And with this, then we've identified and also come up with a definition for visual resource. Any project then that is within 10 miles of a visual resource, those visual resources are required to be simulated from that resource based on the impacts of the project. And again, we have some performance standards that address impacts such as undergrounding the collection lines, the siting and the design. It can be customized for each project. And then there are some screening requirements. This is an image just to bring up the point of discussion that the advisory group talked about for quite a bit. And that was in terms of what is the appropriate setback from residential properties for wind turbines in particular. And this image was developed by Thad Johnson, one of our advisory group members, to help demonstrate the impacts to a non-participating property owner. Over here on the left is where that property owner might be, looking at half a mile distance to an 880-foot tall wind turbine. The image to the far right is a 1 mile distance of a 330-foot tall wind turbine, and that is what was approved at Perrin Ranch. The ordinance landed at a half a mile distance or 3 times the height of the turbine, whichever is greater. But then one of the reasons why we are proposing a half a mile distance is because setbacks are one of the standards that the commission has authority to waive. This is something that we felt could be then customized in the event there were some impacts to neighboring properties that weren't anticipated by the half mile setback. This could be further addressed during the design of the project. And we just wanted to briefly mention that there are some other projects that we've identified through this process that could potentially be ongoing or future projects. And one of those, again, is related to visual impacts. And through this process, we realized that we do not have a countywide visual resource inventory, which may be useful in the future to really help narrow down and identify, besides what we know are visual resources such as scenic corridors that are already designated national parks and monuments. There are other resources that are maybe not named or not identified, and it might be helpful to do that in the future. As a commission is also familiar with, this understanding of cumulative impacts is potentially an ongoing discussion. We've identified particular impacts with this in terms of visual and also wildlife. But there are possibly other cumulative impacts that would warrant additional thought and study going forward. And then finally, we've learned that there are earlier and more effective ways to communicate with tribal governments on these large landscape projects. And so that is where we've developed a suggested way of communicating with tribal governments. That is not written into the ordinance, but it is a supplemental document that we can provide for applicants during pre-application stage. I just wanted to talk a bit about the outreach to notify the community about this amendment. And so throughout the process, the advisory group agendas have been on our webpage. We did have a dedicated webpage to this project. We have contacted over a year ago 11 Native American tribes to let them know about this effort. We've presented to the county's Tri-Diversity Council. In February of this year, we held a virtual open house and it was open for a week. We also had a live virtual session to accompany that. We sent an open house, or rather a media release announcing the open house and the public hearing, and then we have issued the formal legal notices. I did want to mention the public comments that we received both for the open house and then in response to the public hearing notice for this project. For the open house, we received 8 comments. 7 were summarized in the staff report, and then 1 was sent to the commission yesterday. There were various subjects that were mentioned in those comments, including wanting to understand how we are dealing with audible noise and visual impacts. There was a comment regarding noticing of neighbors and how far that would be in terms of actual notifying neighbors about the conditional use permit hearings. There was a question about what is a pre-cultural survey. There was a question and comment about decommissioning and wanting to note that the financial securities may not be adequate. And then there was also a comment about how the wind turbines in particular may impact recreational use on these sites. We did receive one notice, one comment sent in by US mail based on the public hearing notice, and you should have received that yesterday as well. And the subject there was climate change and questioning if there is climate change occurring. And then finally, we wanted to update you about making a presentation to the Navajo Nation, which occurred last Friday, March 25th. We gave a presentation about this project to President Nez, his cabinet members, and energy advisors. The Navajo Nation is working on, I believe they said 7 projects potentially in the Kayenta area, and they had asked for additional consultation with the county in several ways. We do expect to hear a formal response letter from them prior to the Board of Supervisors hearing. We did not receive anything in time to give to you tonight. Just to talk very briefly about the process and schedule. Again, the advisory group has met over 18 times since May of 2020. We've had the fortune to be able to visit most of the large ranches throughout the county and also visit the Perrin Wind Farm and look at the site operational. We've had work sessions and then a retreat also with you all, with the Planning Commission, with individual meetings with the Board of Supervisors. We are just briefing them individually on this right now. And then we've also presented to the county's Tri-Diversity Council. Again, we had the virtual open house from February 9th to the 16th, and then tonight having a public hearing with you. So I have 2 suggested text changes if this is something that you are considering moving forward, and specifically just adding 2 words, one to section 3.19.d.1.c and adding the word project in front of cultural. And you can see in the red, that second sentence would then read a summary of communication and collaboration efforts, such as a pre-project cultural on-site survey, as opposed to pre-cultural on-site survey. There was a comment that might help to clarify what this actually is intended to mean. And then the second change is in relation to section 3.19E1 and adding the word designated in front of trails. And you can see in the red, then that last sentence would read, a sensitive area map shall be prepared to identify sensitive areas, features such as archaeological, cultural, and historic resources or sites, heritage areas or cultural landscapes, visual resources, designated trails. And that would be the change, is to make sure the trails are designated. And then with that, in terms of the findings, there is an analysis in your staff report regarding how this will meet the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. There are many goals and policies in the comprehensive plan that address renewable energy. And as I mentioned earlier, that actual energy element became the foundation for a lot of what you'll see in the ordinance. The second finding that the change will not be detrimental to public health, safety, comfort, convenience, and welfare. There have been a lot of there's been a lot of thought and standards written into the code to address things like public safety, fire mitigation, that sort of issue. And then finally, that the change will not adversely affect the established character of surrounding neighborhood nor be detrimental to adjacent properties. There are a lot of standards built in to this ordinance to closely look at potential impacts to neighborhood character and adjacent properties, with the opportunity for those neighbors to weigh in early in the process and give their comments in terms of potential impacts. So with that, staff recommends that the commission forward AM 20-003 as presented in the staff report, and with the recommended text changes to section 3.19 D1C and section 3.19 E1 onto the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation for approval. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Shaw, for that presentation. Are there any questions by the commissioners? Questions, comments? If so, please raise your hand or unmute so I can see you. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Ms. Shaw, I do have, I've got several I do want to just ask you about. I think they're mostly clarification issues, but this has been a lot of work and I want to be sure that we get it very right. The first one I want to ask about, thank you, Ms. Shaw, for the explanation on turbine setback, and thank you, Thad Johnson, for the visual that Ms. Shaw presented tonight. I believe that answers one of my questions, because in 1.1C 2B little I on page 2, the draft indicates a disfavored location would be one that includes a planned turbine location that is in 1 mile of non-participating residential properties. And then when you get to page 5 in section 1.1E7A little I, the draft calls for a setback of 1/2 mile from the property line of any adjacent non-participating residential zone. And so my question was, if 1 mile is recognized as disfavorable, why is 1/2 mile the setback? And I believe you've answered my question, which is that's why we have waivers. Am I correct in my understanding, Ms. Shaw? So if 1/2 mile did seem inappropriate, the commission has the ability to waive that and make it a bigger setback if need be.
Carol Tavares, you are reading that correctly, and that was a point of discussion with the advisory group, and that is why the disfavored criteria was written that way, to reflect that ideally these turbines would be sited that far, knowing that at times there may be no impacts to neighboring properties. The 1/2 mile was something that was written into the ordinance, with the understanding that that could then be waived by the commission to be greater if there indeed were impacts.
Okay, thank you for that, and I just wanted to be sure I did understand that. The next comment / question I've got, on page 3, it's actually 1.1D 1B, and it mentions only that preliminary desktop vegetation evaluations will be done, but there is no mention of a preliminary site visit. Are desktop vegetation evaluations sufficient?
This is the section that you are referring to, and I'm going to read the actual number for that section. It will be 3.19D 1B, and that is preliminary site investigations. This is the baseline information that we are requesting with the pre-application stage.
Right.
And we did feel that this preliminary evaluation was sufficient at that stage. The application requirements, the formal application requirements, then do get into the actual studies and surveys required to understand then better what would be coming in with the actual application. So that's where we have expanded the requirements for pre-application stage with this list here.
Okay. Okay. And maybe just as an explanation for what I was thinking, just in the paragraph right above it, it talks about, and this is on habitat and wildlife evaluations, it talks about preliminary desktop investigations. But then it also, like in the next sentence, addresses preliminary site investigations. And so when I was coming down to B from A, and noticed that there was no preliminary site investigation, I just wanted to be sure that that was not an oversight. And your answer, I'm satisfied with your answer. Okay, on page 4, we have, this is on 1.1E4, and it talks about the stormwater management to capture and infiltrate stormwater and rainwater. Can you explain how this will practically be done for solar projects with thousands and thousands of solar panels? How will that look?
So the stormwater management, that will be something that will be required to be evaluated by our engineering division for all of these large projects. And there may be opportunities to actually create swales and do some less invasive type of stormwater capture, if you will, than building big detention basins. But that's something that would be required anyway with these large projects. And this is something that we thought with this type of development, whether they could actually capture and infiltrate stormwater and rainwater right on site, right near the panels, versus having to channel. Likely that this would not have a significant amount of runoff, but these would need to be evaluated with each project, whether they're wind, solar, or biomass. So that's something, the low impact development stormwater management techniques is something that is referenced in our engineering design and construction manual. And it's a technique where they are actually capturing and infiltrating stormwater versus channeling them into detention basins. So there could be an opportunity under these panels to develop shallow swales, for instance, and just actually capture it right there versus channeling it off into a larger basin.
Okay. Okay, so it definitely will be something that with it on a case-by-case basis that this commission will actually be looking at and be getting detailed information on each particular one.
That is what we would anticipate. And again, will come in with the development plan itself, where we would actually see how these would be treated.
Okay. Okay. I've got several more questions, but I do see Commissioner Best's hand raised. And I'm wondering, Commissioner Best, do you have a comment that is relevant to this question at this time?
I do, Madam Chair. If you dig into the document, one of the things that we spent a lot of time on was the impact in particular of solar installations. If generally speaking, when you drive past a solar installation today, and I've looked at a lot of them in the last few years, you see an area that has been totally bladed and there's no vegetation, and in some places there's gravel laid down. And that's a direction we tried to turn away from. And so there's language in here that the agrivoltaics is a concept that is being used in some areas where you can actually plant things under a solar array, but we don't have the water for that here. We're grazing country. So what in the language in the document, it says that we would like to leave native grasses and plants alone as much as possible, leave landforms alone as much as possible. Where things need to be disturbed, we would like native plants and topsoil returned, so that hopefully we're really not doing a great deal to change the way water moves. Of course, there are going to be exceptions. Personally, I will be looking at the details as these plans come in. But that is the idea, that we don't want to make scars on the land that turn these projects into brownfields. Who knows what the future holds? It could hold fusion energy. Maybe in 50 years, these are all going to be pulled out because we have a cheaper way to make energy. And if that is the case, we want to make sure that we don't leave behind a mess. In stating it in a few words. And so that language is in here, and I think it's up to us as commissioners to be looking at these projects and making sure that they are held to these standards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Best. And I do know what you were referring to, and imagine this for a minute. We approved a very large solar array on the BREC, okay? So you have all of those solar panels out there. Summer storms, summer rainstorms come along, and they're now falling on panels rather than on the ground. And so my question is what is that water runoff going to be off of those? Because there are thousands of them. What is that going to look like? And or is that water going to be captured? And if so, what would that look like? And I think the answer to my question is the devil is going to be in the details of each case that comes before us. And so that's where the careful analysis is going to need to be made by this commission at that time. So moving on page 9, this is on page 9. This is 1.12C little xi, I guess that would be Roman numeric little number 11. It talks about compliance confirmation, lease agreements, and participating property owner documentation. What is the paper trail required showing confirmation of consent by the property owners? An example would be for government agency, it is a document called a decision document. It talks about a lease agreement. That's an actual title. What would be turned into the county showing that the developer did in fact dialogue and cooperate with the private property owner as far as siting, roads, etc.? What is the county, like Ms. Shaw, for example, what would you be looking for to confirm and verify that this has in fact been met by the developer with the private property owner?
Chair Ontiveros, I wanted to read the section number, so anyone following in the attachment can find this. It's 3.19F. Then it's 3A, and I believe you're referring to just 3A. I'm trying to find that as well. Yes, under compliance, monitoring, mitigation requirements. Is that the section you're reviewing?
Let me make sure. No, where I'm at, it's actually under permits and I hope I've got the right thing here. I printed it off. But it looks like it's 1.1F where it says permits and administration for utility scale renewable energy sections. Okay, that's the header on page 7, and then that's continued on to page 9. And so I'm on page 9 now on the little x, little I, like Roman numeric.
Yep. Thank you. Okay.
11.
Nice. And so that is, yeah, that is section 3.19F 2C and then Roman numeral 11. So yes,
Yeah.
that would then be in terms of compliance confirmation, lease agreement, and participating property owner documentation. So we will need to make sure that in our application for these, that the participating property owner, that those property owners are, that those names are provided with the application. So that the county, so that we know who is participating and who is not. And then along with that, there is the requirement for all of these projects that the applicant conduct the pre-application and the neighborhood meeting with the pre-application requirements. So the neighborhood meeting has to be conducted as well. So this is a more formal designation though, in terms of participating property owner. And that would be coming in with our application. So we actually knew who was participating and who was a non-participating property owner. Did that answer your question?
No, it didn't. Let me ask it in another way. Okay, so this paragraph says compliance confirmation, lease agreements, and participating property owner documentation. Okay, so then prior to issuance of construction or grading permits, the following approvals shall be confirmed. A decision document from a representative agency of the federal government, if applicable, okay? And then you're also going to want to know if there is an actual lease agreement between the developer and the property owner. And so what my question is, where it says the first sentence, compliance confirmation, lease agreements, and participating property owner documentation, is that just, you just simply want to know who the participating property owner is? Or do we want to know that the developer has in fact worked with the property owner, the participating property owner, in the siding and placements? Let's use roads as an example.
Right. Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay, so that is my question.
Okay.
I'm drilling down a little bit more.
Yeah.
Does that make, okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for clarifying that. In the last part of the paragraph where it says, and I'll read that last part. It says, after other lease agreements required to demonstrate legal authority for the facility and confirmation of consent and agreement to siting impacts by participating property owners. That I believe is the part where we would receive confirmation of consent and agreement from the developer that they have actually worked with those participating property owners to reach an agreement that is satisfactory to those property owners. So that is something. Are you asking what the actual mechanism is?
Yeah, because on the for example, it's actually talked about if they're working with a government agency, it's called a decision document. Then it talks about a lease agreement. So up at the top of the document, it would actually be titled that. And so I'm wondering, when the developer comes in and says, hey, we've worked with the participating property owner, and we are in agreement on the placement of, let's just use roads again as an example. We're in agreement on the placement of these roads. What are they going to give you so you know that the private property owner has in fact been worked with and agrees with what the developer is giving you?
Right, we did not call it, we did not name it the way the other requirements are named, as you just pointed out, in terms of an actual lease agreement. When we drafted this, then the discussion that we had was that we would want that confirmation. So it would be a written confirmation, but we
Okay.
did not actually name it or develop a form that would need to be signed. So again, that would be, could be specific to the developer and the type of agreement that they reach. We would want to see that with the application, because this is part of the application requirement.
Okay, okay, all right. So they would have to present proof in some sort of documentation, whatever they may call it. But the
Right.
intent is to have the developer work with a participating property owner in the placement of, we'll use roads as an example for those roads. You guys will be looking for that, and the developer is required to do that per this condition.
That is
Okay.
correct.
Okay, got it. Okay. I've only got a few more, Ms. Shaw. Okay, so moving to page 10. It is 1.1 F 2C, Roman numeric 12D. And it talks about, it addresses the decommissioning plan and financial securities. If I understand this correctly, the first financial security will be in the amount of the estimate of the cost to decommission without taking into consideration salvage value, right?
The first estimate is the cost to decommission that will be used as a basis to provide a finance for the county to contract an expert to oversee the salvage and decommissioning operations. So in other words, realizing that from the once initial operations begin, we've learned that these have a lot of the materials, particularly the metal in the wind turbines, have a high salvage value. And so to create an estimate based on the percentage of the value of the facility minus salvage was very difficult to arrive at, and also give then the county sufficient security to actually decommission something if that were to occur. So the idea was presented that we would use this security to hire a contractor that could then oversee that decommissioning, with the idea that part of their fee would be returned in that salvage value of the materials. And then the second security would be submitted at the 5th anniversary of the operations, knowing at that time then with some depreciation and then potentially also cost of materials changing, then there actually would be a different financial burden, if you will, at that time, 5 years out, to actually pull down and start to decommission the project if that was needed. And then those would be reevaluated. That estimate would be updated every 5 years. So it's kind of a two-step security analysis.
Okay, and that was what I thought it was, but I just wanted to be sure that I was reading this properly. And so it is a two-step. They'll actually be providing two separate financial securities. The second one is not going to replace the first one, right?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Okay, so I did understand that correctly. Now this, it talks about in this same decommissioning, it talks about, I'm actually on on paragraph 2 now, okay, under D. So there was there's D, then there's paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. And in paragraph 2, it talks about the instrument shall be transferable to cover the activities of any other entity which may have acquired the project prior to its decommissioning. Now, this may really seem out there, but let's just say that one of these entities was an LLC and that LLC filed for bankruptcy. Will the financial, okay, so my question is will that financial security, have you guys thought through that if there was any entity which did file for bankruptcy, that the county would always be able to have that security, that this financial security could in no way be skirted with a bankruptcy filing?
Yes, that's an important question. And this subparagraph D2 is speaking to the scenario where if not in terms of a bankruptcy, but for instance, if the site was sold to a different operator, a different developer, then that security could be transferred over. It doesn't specifically address a bankruptcy, but I can ask other, our attorney to chime in here, but I believe that the paragraphs preceding this then would cover or, protect the county in the event of a bankruptcy. So having those other securities, that subparagraph is really intended to address the scenario where the project is transferred to another entity.
Okay, and I absolutely do understand that. I guess then maybe my overall question would be, has there been thought to, making sure that this kind of financial security cannot be skirted with a bankruptcy filing? That's my question. And that may be more of a legal question, but bankruptcy stuff happens out there. And people are left holding the bag on it. And I just want to be sure that does not happen to the county if things go really south.
I will speak to my understanding of this, and this was something that we spent quite a bit of time with, and our legal staff has reviewed this. From my reading of this would protect the county in the event of a bankruptcy, but I would ask our attorney to verify that understanding.
Okay, and I also, so to keep things in order, could council please chime in on this conversation?
Can hear. Yes, to answer the question expressly whether or not bankruptcy was a contingency considered, no, that wasn't regrettably something that we discussed, but the conditions placed upon the bonds and financial instruments and securities were things that we did discuss in terms of it being the obligation and responsibility of the entity to ensure and make it to ensure that the bonds would hold in the case of any contingency. But I guess I would need to, I guess it would in large part take place on what sort of bond or language in the bond instrument itself dictates. But I'm sorry, but I can't answer the question right now as to whether or not we're protected in the case of bankruptcies. I'd have to do some additional research into that.
Okay, and Mr. Lumpkin, thank you for that. And I would just like to ask that we just take a careful look at this to make sure, again, that if things go really, really bad, that under no circumstances would a bankruptcy filing allow any entity, developer, anybody to be able to skirt the costs to decommission. Commissioner, let's see, Vice Chair Walters, your hand's raised.
Thank you. I spoke to Jay Christelman, the development director, about this. It's very typical in a development scenario where the bonds or instruments of guarantee would survive in the case of a bankruptcy or those sort of things. And when I spoke to Jay, he said that he would address that, but I would like to make sure that Mr. Lumpkin gets with Bill Ring and whoever, and let's get this worked out, because we need to make sure that the instruments that we get do survive any sort of a catastrophic failure of a company, bankruptcy or whatever, so that we have protection. Thank you.
I will follow up on that.
Madam Chair and Vice Chair, this is Jay. We did write a condition. This is what we did with Chevelon. We required that they post a bond or financial assurance to procure a third-party contract service to oversee and PM the decommissioning. And I think that's what Melissa wrote into that, just because the county's not in the business of project management of a decommission bond and a salvage operation. I don't know, Vice Chair Walters, if that's exactly what you were talking about, but that was an additional assurance that we wrote in to require.
Well, typically what we do on large projects or developments, and here in Coconino County, we've had developers go bankrupt, and we've had that unfortunate experience of not having money to clean up after them, say Belmont, for example. So we just want to make sure that how we write this up, that we're consciously addressing those issues.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Mr. Chrisman, it really I think what Vice Chair Walters and I are both trying to accomplish here is that there is no way that a developer, because Vice Chair Walters gave a very good example of a bankruptcy filing of a big developer, and it can be a mess, and I don't want to see that happen in Coconino County. And I just want to be sure that these financial instruments that they're providing, as Vice Chair Walters said, will survive any kind of a bankruptcy filing.
Agreed.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Chrisman. Commissioner Best, your hand is raised.
This is a great conversation, and I'm really impressed with everybody involved. We spent a lot of time on this in the committee. One point that I would make is that according to representatives of the industry, they almost plan on making a profit in decommissioning. According to them, well, first of all, if they had to put a bond out for decommissioning without salvage, they probably would never do the project, because they'd have to pay a few percent at least each year on that bond, and it would sink the project. They say that realistically what happens is the salvage value of the project is worth more than the decommissioning. And so that reassured me somewhat. I think this is a very good conversation about bankruptcy, because you wouldn't want the salvage value to end up in the hands of somebody else because of the bankruptcy.
Correct.
And so this is a great conversation. It also highlights the importance of maintaining these projects and checking up on them, so that when it's time to decommission, there's as little to do as possible. And a lot of that involves how the land under these projects is being treated. If it's well maintained and we're just pulling out hardware and selling it, that's a lot less of a burden than trying to restore thousands of acres of land to something beyond brownfield. So as these go on, we want to make sure that the county has a mechanism for checking up on how these developments look as they're ongoing, so that the decommissioning is as cheap as possible. And I think that's in everyone's interest, the applicants and the counties. Thank you.
Yes, and Commissioner Best, I concur with you on those comments, and that kind of circles back to why I wanted to be sure that that's why I was talking about the documentation that was going to be given to the county showing cooperation between the developer and the participating property owner. Because let's think about it. We know two of the property owners. We have Michael McCauley with Perrin Ranch, and we have Bill Cordasco with the Babbitt Ranches. I think that both of those individuals know their lands better than any developer will ever know them. And they're going to make sure that their lands are well cared for. And that's why I wanted to be sure, because I don't think either one of the individuals that I mentioned are going to put up with any shenanigans on their private property, seeing anything but well cared for land on there. And that's why I think the documentation between the developer and the property owner is going to go a long way. So the developer clearly understands what the property owner expects while they're developing that property. So I kind of think we've come full circle here on some of my concerns, and I do agree with your comments. Ms. Shaw, you're here.
Thank you, Chair Tavares. I just wanted to read one sentence in the same section, and it's the very end of subparagraph 1. It says, a financial security shall be a bond or other security approved by the county attorney's office to ensure removal of all equipment and restoration of the land to its original condition. And that sentence was intentionally written to be fairly broad, to give the county sufficient leeway to evaluate what the security will be. And it might be with that then that there would be the opportunity to have that security address potential bankruptcy, but that's something that we'll have to work out with our attorney's office to make sure that sentence would cover that contingency.
Okay, and I do see it was a larger umbrella. And I did see that sentence. And I get what you're saying, that it's a larger umbrella to make sure that, you know, the county attorney's office has the right to review it. But I'm just going to kind of underscore Vice Chair Walters in my comments that we want to be sure that any financial instrument will survive a bankruptcy filing by any developer, anything that goes on, because stuff like that really does happen. It really does happen. So we're just trying to get ahead of it here. And I think the point's made, and I think our council is going to look at it. And so I think now that it's been brought forward, I think it's going to be looked at and addressed appropriately. But thank you, Ms. Shaw, for pointing that out. And I am, I've only got 2 more questions, Ms. Shaw. We are almost to the end of this. Okay, on page 11, 1.1 F3A. Okay, it talks about compliance, monitoring, and mitigation requirements for utility scale renewable energy systems. Okay, so the first sentence says, monitoring plans and compliance reporting shall be provided in yearly or other specific increments based on a reporting schedule required by the conditional use permit requirements. The last sentence states, the methodology of monitoring and compliance reporting shall be as determined by the director. Can you clarify why the director would determine the methodology instead of the commission?
That was a discussion that we had with the advisory group, but it was mostly to respond to understanding that the monitoring plans would be, they're going to be different for each site. And so that's something where the plans should come in and the commission will have a chance to review them. But because they are ongoing, the monitoring plans and compliance for post-construction and operational impacts will include wildlife, sensitive plant species, etc. And that because modification of facility maintenance and operations may be required based on those impacts, that's when the methodology of the monitoring and the compliance reporting will be looked at as those yearly or other reports come in, because it may be that based on the monitoring plan or compliance reporting that the methodology has to change based on that yearly evaluation. It may say something, may find something where the actual methodology needs to be updated and the director needs to oversee something that that perhaps wouldn't be anticipated at the time of commission review. And I believe that our wildlife planner, our urban wildlife planner is with us still. She may be able to give additional input on that, but that is from a, you know, a basic planning point of view, understanding that we may get more information on a year-to-year basis, and then it may require adjustments in how that monitoring is conducted.
Okay, and it is felt that that is something the director should decide on rather than the commission. In the conversations, the committee conversations, the advisory group conversations, you discussed this. I'm sure it was, obviously it's in here.
Right.
You know, we have got a great director right now. And that's a shout out to Jay Chrisselman. We've got a great director. I guess I just
Thank you for
want
that.
to be sure.
Really appreciate that, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I meant it, Mr. Chrisselman. Times change, people change, you know what I mean? Positions change. Like I have no problem with this being with Mr. Chrisselman reviewing this. These permits, we're talking 30 years down the line. And I have just found kind of over the years that sometimes it's better to have a group of people looking at something rather than having an individual look at something, because sometimes individuals you know, can have personal preferences, and that's what I'm saying. This methodology and monitoring has always been hugely important to me. And I just don't want there to be any cracks here. You know, the Board of Supervisors is going to get to take a look at this too. But I just want to be, I'm just pointing that out, that maybe I would feel better if it was something that the commission looked at together as a whole, as a group, if the methodology had to be changed, so they would be the oversight review on this. But I'm going to leave it at that. Okay. And my last question is, it's actually the very next paragraph. It's on, so now we're on 3A little I. The last sentence reads, changes to wind turbine operations shall, and there's a slight typo here, but we need to have the word be included between the words shall and limited.
Correct.
So it should read, changes to wind turbine operations shall be limited to the minimum time necessary to mitigate the impact, not to affect more than 0.05% of total annual wind facility hours. Now, I don't know what kind of circumstances would ever lead to there needing to be more of a curtailment, But what if the impact cannot be mitigated within the 0.05% of total annual wind facility hours? I realize that this may be like a catastrophic, situation, but catastrophic situations happen. And so what happens if the impact can't be mitigated?
That's an excellent question. I just wanted to give a bit of background as to where that number came from. And that was actually derived from the curtailment number that was written into the parent wind farm conditions of approval. So it was based on understanding what might be needed to curtail the turbine impacts based on primarily impacts to birds and bats.
Right.
Yeah, but what I'm gathering from your question is if there's another unforeseeable or unforeseen catastrophic impact and what type of authority we would have to curtail the operations. That we don't have that specific scenario written into this draft. That might be something that would be a standard condition of approval. I am not sure if that has been written in any kind of catastrophic impact condition written into the other use permits that we've already issued. But we did not write any standard in here that would address an unforeseen catastrophic impact.
Right, and kind of where I'm coming from, when we approved BRAC, I addressed it at that point, and the response given back to the commission from the developer was, well, we don't want to go down that road because then we're going to have trouble getting investors. And so now I feel like we've reached the point where we have conflicting interests. And because the interests of Coconino County are to protect our resources. I understand that the developers have a financial side to this. Okay, I get it. I live in the real world. And so that's why I'm saying this may be sufficient, but things that really seem to be changing around us. And we talk so much about monitoring plans and compliance reporting, in yearly increments, or as the commission puts out. We talk about the methodology of monitoring and compliance. And when we're monitoring and complying and looking at methodology, and if 15 years down the line, we reach a big oops, like, wow, we didn't see that coming. What is going on? And it's catastrophic. What can the county do if the impact can't be mitigated in that time period? Because I get that it is catastrophic, some of the stuff we're talking about, but I just wonder if a contingency needs to be made. If maybe we just need to give some thought to that now.
That may take, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Jessica Simmons. I can take a shot at this. The desktop studies that are done ahead of time look into the wildlife resources of an area, and they usually do a pretty decent job of assessing how much of a chance there is at some sort of catastrophic outcome. And of course, like you say, things can always change, but those desks, we do have a lot of data on birds and bats, and the desktop studies can be very informative. Of course, they have limitations. One of the worst examples of, you could maybe call it catastrophic outcomes for birds that has been from wind farms is the Altamont wind farm in California, killing lots and lots of golden eagles. And they've worked with that. They've fixed the problem. It's always pulled up as, oh, well, this is just the worst outcome we've seen, and wind farms are so bad for birds, but they've fixed it. And also some other, if it really is catastrophic, like for example, if a bird or bat species becomes endangered because of wind farms, then the federal government would come in, because if a species were to become listed, then there really are hard and fast laws governing that. So I just feel like a catastrophic outcome is extremely unlikely, just based on the studies that have to go on beforehand, the knowledge we have, and kind of the worst case scenario I can think of is Altamont, and they have really rectified it. They've done a really good job with that, with newer turbine technology. And then of course there are new monitoring and avoidance technologies coming out all the time, like ultrasonic sound speakers to scare bats away, or AI systems that scan for birds and shut down turbines if certain bird species are detected. So I totally understand and appreciate your concern, and I share it. And I honestly, I just think it's unlikely, if that helps.
Okay, no, I get that it is, and that's why I categorize it as catastrophic. Okay, so I do get that. But the unforeseen that can happen, you gave a really good example of it. And I think your example may help give me a little bit of kind of ease my concerns. One of the examples that you gave right now was, let's suppose that something happened to one of the species that we know would likely be affected by, say, a wind turbine, and it ended up going on an endangered species list. That is when somebody else, that's basically a safety net to these species. And if that in fact did happen, then there is something else. And I want you to make sure, Ms. Simmons, I want to make sure that I'm understanding this. But that is where some other agency, there's going to be a safety net underneath that that's going to come in, and they would tell the energy developer, hey, you got to shut this down.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, that does give me a little bit more peace of mind, and thank you, Ms. Simmons, for that. And actually, my last comment tonight, and it's actually going to the definitions, and the definition for cumulative impacts. I really like this one, and I'm going to read it. Shall mean the total effects from any existing or foreseeable future utility scale renewable energy project or projects on the fragmentation of wildlife linkages or habitat or visual resources. This is the part I like that I thought we were told by council we couldn't get, and that is foreseeable future are projects that are approved but not constructed, pending applications and pre-application requests. So I thought that I had asked this question before, and I thought that I was told that we could not consider the unbuilt ones that have been approved but not built. And now I see that we can consider even ones that are in pre-application. And that's something that council has looked at, and this commission can indeed actually consider.
Chair Ontiveros, did you want a response from council on that?
I think I do, because does anyone else remember us being told that we couldn't have the unbuilt ones, the undeveloped ones, we couldn't consider those? And so I just want to be sure, because I like this last sentence in here. I like it a lot. I just want to be sure that it has in fact been approved by council. So yes, I would like council to weigh in.
Chairwoman, Aaron Lumpkin here. Just the difference being in this situation, that with the potential and future acceptance and passage of this ordinance by the Board of Supervisors, there would then be legal authority to take those things into consideration, whereas before such an ordinance had not been passed.
Ah, that explains it. Okay, thank you so much for that, Mr. Lumpkin. And that actually concludes all of my questions and all of my comments. So I do just want to reach out and ask the other commissioners if they have any other questions or comments before I open it to public, before I make a call to the public. Okay, and I'm not seeing any, so I would ask if there is anyone in the public that wishes to address the commission on this case this evening. And I see two hands raised starting up at the top. I see a Mr. Thad Johnson. Mr. Johnson, would you please state your name and address for the record? And then the comments are limited to 3 minutes. So please proceed.
Okay, Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts. My name is Thad Johnson. My address is 7709 West Painted Rock Trail in Williams, Arizona. And just a brief intro, I've been working with the Coconino County Sustainable Building Program for probably 15 plus years. I design passive solar homes, mostly off-grid, and I'm an advocate for renewable energy as well as, just sustainable living. And I live about 2 miles north of Perrin Ranch. And I wanted to just discuss briefly the setbacks. You had brought it up as well, Madam Chair. My feeling is, living 2 miles north of a wind turbine, and with the setback that we had back then, which I think was about 13.4 times the height of the turbine, they're quite a ways off, and they're not a visual impediment at all. But I know working with my clients, many people have bought land, way out in the middle of nowhere because they love the scenery up here, as most of us do. And a wind turbine, especially an 880-foot wind turbine, which they're beginning to be, quite, over twice the height of Perrin Ranch, is going to be a heavy visual impact if it's only a half a mile away. So I get that it's waiverable, but I think my preference would be that we define the setback as 1 mile, 3 times the height of the turbine at 1 mile, and allow the waiver to make it shorter than that if a non-participating owner is okay with that. And it may be that the non-participating owner could become a participating owner by, signing an agreement or something that says, I'm okay with it being a half a mile. But I just think we're doing a disservice to our, community and property owners if an 880-foot wind turbine is a half a mile away. So that's my thoughts at this point.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson. The other hand that is raised is Perrin Ranch, and I am thinking that's probably Mike McCauley. If so, please state your name and address for the record, and your 3 minutes begin now.
It is Mike McCauley. I live at 3445 North Schaefer Lane in Flagstaff. And just, I have 2 comments, one on the stormwater management. The concern there, when water hits dirt, it becomes surface water and falls under another set of rules and regulations. And if there's going to be any impoundment constructed to control or do something with that surface water, a water right to the Department of Water Resources is a required activity, and that can take some time and some expense. The other thing I have a question about is on the monitoring. You have it to be determined by the director. My question with that is, what is the knowledge required when you're talking about the plants and the flora that's out there? You do need to have somebody that is knowledgeable about what our good grasses and good plants are and what our invasive and noxious species are. My suggestion would be to change that to include either the property owner or somehow have somebody with the appropriate knowledge to go out and look at the landscape to see what needs to be done to make it and to restore it to its historic health, I guess I would say. I thank you for your time, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McCauley. Okay, is there anyone else in the public that wishes to address the commission on this case this evening? And seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close it now, and I'm going to open it up to commission discussion. And Commissioner Best, why don't you go ahead and start?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been part of the committee, and it's been a great experience. I think that we have brought together the values of the comprehensive plan and a lot of stakeholders. We have considered a lot of history with kind of in the background is our history of exploitation of other resources, lumber, grass for grazing, uranium, the resources really that built our region, which is a good thing, but it was extraction and development that was done imperfectly based on a lack of, at the time, thinking ahead far enough and science. And so I think we've tried to, and also cultural issues with tribal entities. So I think we've tried to bring all that together, and I think we've done a pretty good job. We've also had a very dedicated and competent staff to work with, and a lot of people have put a lot of time into this. I concur with a couple of issues. I concur that half a mile is closer than I want a wind tower to my house. I can tell you that right up front. Boy, we went back and forth on this so many times, and I'm almost, in a sense, I'm embarrassed to bring it up now because I've had so many shots at it. But I'd like to hear what other commissioners say, and I really have a lot of faith in the other commissioners that have a lot of common sense and knowledge. So that's something I think we should chat about. And the other is if we want to get more specific about monitoring. I think we can certainly now count on county staff to put together a monitoring program that sends out qualified people to look at plants and everything else. Do we want to look at a future where we need more specific direction? That's another question I have. The number of hours that a wind farm could be shut down to mitigate primarily bird and bat loss is another issue. I think we've been back and forth again with this many times, and of course, people trying to get financing for wind farms have a different point of view than folks concerned about birds and bats. And not that both sides can't understand each other. And that was, part of the great experience of being on this committee for most of 2 years was that we really had great conversations, and it was a very amicable process. But there's another question I have, and I would invite others to weigh in. Overall, I think it's a great document. And I hope that, I've been reading about other areas of the country that are going through what we're going through, trying to figure out how to make the transition that we need to make to renewable energy without degrading other values that every community has. And so I hope that this is a template and is used by other communities to answer the questions that we have. We're the second largest county in the country, so we have the question is before us in a big way, and we have great resources out there. especially in my opinion, with photovoltaics. And so I'm hoping that this is just not a local issue that we're working on, but really a national issue. So with those comments, I look forward to hearing other commissioners' comments, and I want to compliment the chair for her very thorough questioning. Obviously, she also spent a lot of time reading recently, and I really appreciate that. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. Generally speaking, I support this, absolutely. There are a few things that do make me a little uncomfortable. Probably the most uncomfortable thing is me living in a house and somebody putting up a tower half mile away, because it could be 800 feet tall, and that would be that would rock my world personally. So I can see that we might want to take a look at that. So I look forward to other comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Best. And what I'm going to do, since you're the one right now that just spoke to this, we've had the conversation of the mile setback. We also had Mr. Johnson, his comments on make it a mile and then waive it, and then a waiver will bring it back to a half a mile. Because I started thinking about this, I don't think it almost seems like a reverse waiver to me. If we say the setback is a half a mile, but we're going to give you a waiver for a mile setback. To me, that seems backwards. And so my question to you is, how do you feel about Mr. Johnson's comments that the setback be a mile and then the waiver can address a shorter distance?
Well, if that question is to me, I see a lot of merit in that. Usually, as you say, a waiver goes the other direction. This is tough for industry because a mile's a long way. A mile's a section. But at the same time, there's lots of real estate in Coconino County that's more than a mile from any house or any private property. I mean, basically all the maps all the projects on the maps that Ms. Shaw presented earlier are farther than that away. So I think I would personally, be more comfortable with a mile, and it is waiverable. And
right.
And you know, we're a planning and zoning commission where we have public meetings, and if the meeting fills up with unhappy citizens, it could end up being 2 miles. You know, we've all been surprised before when something we thought seemed routine fills up the chambers with unhappy neighbors. And so that's why we have a planning and zoning commission. So I would be comfortable with a mile, and like to hear what other people have to say.
Okay. And so Commissioner Best, I'm gonna ask you this because I spoke about monitoring. Mike McCauley, who is from Parent Ranch, talked about monitoring. What do you have a suggestion on what? Because I think you have the same concern that I have about the monitoring, the one that Mr. McCauley brought out. Do you have a suggestion? Mr. McCauley's suggestion was perhaps in addition to the director being the one with the methodology, we need somebody else in there with some expertise. Who do you see that being? Like, do you have a suggestion here?
Yeah, the director is not going to go and monitor. The director is going to determine who monitors. And there might be 2 areas here where we need some continuing work. One area is this: we might want to establish exactly the parameters of monitoring. That would be vegetation, wildlife, possible water issues, and some other things we might come up with. So that could be something that we put in the document, or it could be done separately. The other one is the pre-application cultural analysis. What I think history has shown is that the various tribal entities, and there are a dozen of them, are not a monolithic group. There's no one group who speaks for all of them, and we definitely want to make sure that we are sensitive to cultural issues, because that's one thing that was probably missed a lot in previous, definitely missed a lot in previous development of resources. Exactly how to do that is a tough question. Sometimes it's informal, sort of hands-on communication that an applicant would have, from a different part of the country, would have no idea how to do effectively. And this is, remember, pre-application. So this is just somebody arriving in town trying to figure out if it's even worth their while to do an application. So there are two areas right there: monitoring and the pre-application cultural analysis, where there's more work to be done. And whether we do it within this document or whether we establish sort of ancillary amendments to this, that's a question that I think we might want to discuss.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Best. Commissioner Burton?
So I was thinking the exact same thing about the 1 mile, half mile. When that was presented, I was thinking it was kind of backwards. I personally would feel much more comfortable with a mile and waiverable to a half mile. So that's my input on that one. And then I trust my fellow commissioners with how they want to handle the monitoring question. It definitely should be someone who actually knows what they're looking at, I think. And I also agree that with Commissioner Best that, the tribal communities, they're not just one group, there's multiple tribes, and, their beliefs don't necessarily align and their feelings don't necessarily align. And so we definitely need to make sure that any tribe that could potentially be impacted, each one is that there's resources to contact them. So other than that, I think that we're off to a very good start on this, and I know a lot of work's been put into the document, and I can definitely support what's been done here. So those are my comments.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Burton. Commissioner Williamson? Commissioner Williams, I'm sorry.
That's quite all right.
I know your name. Sorry about that.
First, I want to say thank you to everybody that has worked so hard on this. This is significant upgrades and document, and I have to say I do concur with Commissioner Best and Burton on their comments. And a half a mile does seem too close to me, and I'd rather have to give a waiver for that and have it be 1 mile. But really I concur with what's been said so far.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the monitoring, and specifically for the other commissioners, I am looking on page 11. I'm looking at the last sentence in paragraph 3A. And it says the methodology of monitoring and compliance reporting shall be as determined by the director. I'm wondering, I'm uncomfortable with it, and I think that Mr. McCauley hit it on the head when he said we need to have somebody with expertise that is going to be doing this. And so I'm kind of looking to see if any of the other commissioners can throw out who that person may be. Mr. McCauley suggested the property owner. I'm just throwing that out. And Commissioner Ruggles, you're actually up next in discussion. Throw some thoughts out there.
Well, to begin with, I'm going to throw some thoughts out there on a couple of other things.
Okay.
First things first, Thad Johnson's comments were on point. I know how we arrived at that during the committee discussion. I think we got it backwards. The setback should be a mile. And then since we have written in the possibility of waiving setback requirements, that the point is it should be a mile. And if we need to get closer, then that should be the subject of a waiver. It's pure and simple. I don't know what we were thinking at the time. I think this came about because there was a possibility that if a wind turbine was sited on state land that was a section, a square mile, that the way we were originally looking at it, it would preclude the placement of that wind turbine on that section under certain circumstances. However, since we're looking at a waiving a requirement, I think 1 mile is far more appropriate. Second thing, you heard me in the study session object to the term expert and how it's used here. However, I've got to change my opinion on that. I had suggested when it came to the acoustic end of it that it be a licensed professional engineer. However, I've since looked at the way federal and state courts have essentially defined expert in terms of expert testimony. Same thing, I looked at the Federal Rule of Evidence 702, and it's exactly what state and federal courts look at in terms of it. And I think in the paragraph I was looking at where we said qualified expert, I think that covers it very nicely. Doesn't need to be changed. Now, as far as monitoring, I think this is a very difficult point to be at right now in trying to determine who that would be. And if I remember correctly in our discussions, this is the reason why we went with specifying that the Director of Community Development would be the person who would work with a suitable, expert or experts in determining how that monitoring is conducted and the methodology, since it's going to vary tremendously depending on where these sites are. Unless we want to continue this tonight, I don't think we can come up, and I certainly can't at this point, come up with who else should determine how that monitoring is done and the methodology for it at this point. We could be here until the sun comes up tomorrow morning trying to figure that out, I think. That being said, as far as everything else goes, after participating with the group that helped Ms. Shaw put this together, I think we have come up with something that is remarkably better than almost anyone else out there has right now. We've addressed issues that I think other people have never even thought about so far, and in particular, issues that are particular to the desert Southwest and our environment here. That being said, I am completely behind what we have right now. I'm not proposing any changes other than the setback. So I'll be happy to turn it over to everyone else at this point.
Okay, Commissioner Ruggles, you just now spoke about the definition of the word expert, okay? So if we look at this last sentence that says the methodology of monitoring and compliance reporting shall be as determined by the director. How do you feel about adding some verbiage that says working with a qualified expert?
Thank you. That was just about when you mentioned that when you started. That is almost exactly the wording I thought of. So given how that has been defined, and especially defined and refined, I think in the last 28 years in the courts in this country, that would be wholly appropriate. And I think a director, regardless of who it is, of community development, is going to rely on input from his staff, as well as perhaps some particular comments from the public and landowners on who those experts might be. We have 3 excellent universities who have extension programs in this state as well. So you've got plenty of resources to pull from in that respect.
Right. Okay. So I'm making some notes here. Okay, Commissioner Ruggles, I have another question for you because it sounds like you have read up on some of the federal law. Do you know, can you speak that if we're talking about tribal consultation here, because a lot of times these developers that are coming in and doing this, a lot of them are getting federal monies to do this. Can you speak to that? When federal monies are used, one of the requirements is consultation with the tribes?
Well, it all
That's a
depends. I do know one thing, especially after working with DOD, that it is really in how the funding is allocated. But the other thing is, if you're looking at who is an expert, a lot of that could, well, it could be a tribal entity and say elders in the tribe who are familiar or regard that as a part of former or part of their territory, sacred lands. They could be considered and probably would be considered as experts in terms of how the courts would look at this based on some of the cases I looked at today, which are very, very interesting. Expert is not a solid, very thoroughly delineated standard. It covers a lot of base, but it allows what the court said in some of the cases I looked at is essentially that you have the ability to look at the credentials of those people. If you disagree with their opinions, which they essentially are, in looking at well, what they are telling you about their opinions relative to, say, okay, acoustics, the other aspects of siting, other aspects of any other part of this. So, and the other thing that struck me was that when these things are looked at, that the idea here is to get at the truth of the matter based on facts with as much questioning involved as possible when it comes to, quote, expert testimony or an expert report or anything else. Hope that goes somewhat along in terms of answering your question.
Okay, I have made notes here, Commissioner Ruggles, and I just want to say that I see Commissioner Best's hand raised. I see I see Vice Chair Walters' hand made. And what I'm going to do is on this first round, I'm going to let each commissioner have a chance to speak, and then we're going to come back to that. So Commissioner Clifford, you are next.
I agree with the 1 mile, and then I really don't want to see them any closer to a house, but we can give a waiver as needed. I think 1 mile should be the closest that we get to a residence. The methodology, and Commissioner Ruggles was going down the same road I was, with a local horticulturalist or somebody who knows our area, working with the director and the landowners to look at the vegetation and bringing it back to where it's supposed to be. They're going to have the best knowledge. It's not going to be just a layman out there who has a lawn business, who is an expert on the pasture lands for the animals and stuff like that that you have on the Perrin Ranch and on the Babbitt Ranch. So I was going down that same road with our universities and the extensions that we have here in northern Arizona. So that's my 2 cents on it, and I agree with everything that's been said by the other commissioners. I agree with what has been said in the path that we're going down with this.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Clifford. Vice Chair Walters.
Thank you. I have a few thoughts about this. One, I agree with the 1 mile and a half mile waiver for wind operations. I don't think that that's necessarily appropriate for solar. I don't know that a half a mile is too close for solar. So, and we're addressing both of these, if I understand correctly. So I'd like to be more specific about that, and put that in the document the right way. The other thing is, I think that I've always been comfortable with the director's ability to judge situations, and I think that the proper thing here is to say the qualified experts as determined by the director. I think that's appropriate. And those are a couple things. I know that we've had quite a bit of time looking at these documents and going through them, but as we go through this together and look at things, the different views that we have, including from landowners, as Mike McCauley brought to us, there's different aspects that we don't necessarily look at the first time we read things, or the second time we read them even. So to have these discussions while we're all together is very valuable. And I hate to rush this forward to the Board of Supervisors if we still are trying to draft some of the nuances into here. So that's basically what I have to say.
Okay, Vice Chair Walters, on your comments on the 1 mile, half mile, if you look at page 2, numeric number 2B, it's literally the second to the last paragraph on that page. It says any site that includes a planned turbine location that is within 1 mile of non-participating residential properties. So that was actually, it's actually under the subsection of additional disfavor criteria for wind energy. So it actually does.
Okay, I apologize.
No, no, that's good. But I just wanted to point that out, that this is specific to wind, what we're talking about tonight.
Okay, well, I missed that. I don't have it printed out here, and I just have one screen instead of being able to have several as normal.
No, I know, and I have trouble toggling between the two. That's why I have to print everything out. Okay, Commissioner Walters, can you also speak to? It was something that I have brought up. It was something that is causing Commissioner Best a bit of heartburn, and that is the impacts. And this is going to that sentence where I was talking about it being catastrophic and what happens if there is a catastrophic situation and it cannot be dealt with in that 0.05% shutting down the turbines.
Well,
Are you comfortable with Ms. Simmons' explanation on that?
Well, I understand where she's coming from. I've wrestled with this since the first time that I read it, and it's a very difficult conundrum to try to foresee something that might happen. Let's say an eagle's nest appears one season too close to some turbines and wipes out one of the mates. Is that a factor, or is it that we have a catastrophic fire and changes the habitat for some animals and then they shift and move? And I don't know what would do that, and I'm certainly not a wildlife biologist to be able to try to predict those types of events. So her explanation and the attempt that they're trying to do to identify and mitigate those concerns it's admirable. Is it adequate? I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to overcomplicate these things, and I tend to do that. I have an engineering background, and I tend to overcomplicate things, and so I tend to defer to experts and listen to what they have to say. And so in this situation, I'm hesitating to override the experts, I guess is what I'm saying in that clause.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Walters. Okay, this is Chair Ontiveros, and I think that everyone, based on my questioning and comments, I think everyone knows where I'm at. I think that based on all of the comments that have been given by literally every commissioner here, that what we need to do is on page 5, where it talks about, we're talking about 7AI. And that's where it talks about, or a half a mile from the property line of any residential zone. I think that every commissioner here, if I'm misstating anyone, correct me, but I think that needs to be changed to 1 mile. Okay, so that's what I'm writing down in my notes here. Okay, the other thing that we have talked about, this is on page 11. This is on let me get this right. Okay, so this is on 1.1F 2. No, excuse me, 1.1F3 A little I, and no, excuse me, A, where it's the last sentence that says the methodology of monitoring and compliance reporting shall be as determined by the director. And Commissioner Walters, I believe that you worded it best. What did you say there? The methodology of monitoring and compliance reporting shall be as determined by the director. Something about qualified expert as determined by the director, maybe to change it. The methodology of monitoring and compliance reporting shall be.
Stand by just a second. I wrote it down here and then I scratched it over.
Okay.
So it should be a qualified experts as determined by the director.
Okay, so we're going to change that sentence to say the methodology of monitoring and compliance reporting shall be done by a qualified expert as determined by the director.
Qualified experts, because it may take more than one. So let's put qualified experts.
Right.
And then he can have one or more.
Okay. Exactly. Okay, so we've got that sentence. Now what I want to do, I want to come back. We're going to go through everyone again here with these modifications. So Commissioner Best, I'm going to come back to you and I want to ask what your thoughts are on the modifications on the mile, the half mile to a mile, and on the modification to that last sentence. And if you have any idea as to what to do with the impacts, if you can throw something out.
So the 1 mile, I agree with.
Okay.
I wish I had at hand what I think Mr. Short sent me, which was the monitoring language in the Chevron Butte case, because we tightened it up quite a bit. We heard from, I forget quite who, but people involved that Perrin Ranch had a large committee monitoring Perrin Ranch, but actual sort of executive authority was not well delineated. And so it was hard to make decisions. And I felt like we corrected that at Chevron Butte, but I don't have it before me. If anybody, any staff member can lay their fingers on that in the next 5 minutes, that would be lovely. But I'm pretty comfortable saying qualified experts as basically as directed by the director.
As determined by the director?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if my math is right, if you have 50 towers at 0.05%, you can shut down towers for 219 hours a year. I bet Commissioner Ruggles can double check me on that in a heartbeat. That's just, that's me doing the calculator on my phone. If, that's on the one hand, a lot of hours for the operator to lose. It's a significant amount of time. Boy, it sure is situational though. If we're killing eagles, we could want more hours. We have I don't think we understand the bat situation yet. If there's a bat migration, we might want more hours. That's a tough one. I am not opposed to taking another month and looking at this myself. I'm not. We put a lot of work into this, and I definitely want to get it right. At the same time, I don't. Yeah, I would rather get it right. I would rather pass it on to the supervisors, right, as opposed to them having to dig into the level of detail that we're digging into tonight, because I think they've got a lot on their plate, and I don't know if they could do it. I think the pre-application cultural analysis issue is another one that's important. And I think that has to be done separately. I don't think we can handle that within this document. I think that we have recognized it appropriately, but that's a big issue that a lot of people are working on. And there's a lot to do there. There are many entities involved. There are many separate cultures involved. And so I don't think we're going to solve that tonight. I think we've recognized the problem appropriately. And there are very qualified groups. The Nature Conservancy is one I know that is working on it. So I think we're okay with that. So the 1 mile I'm good on. Monitoring I'm pretty good on, although I wish I could see what we did at Chevelon Butte. The 0.05%, I'm okay with, but of course I have the same questions everybody does. And that's where I am. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Best. Okay, Commissioner Burton, coming back to you for your comments after you've heard the other commissioners' comments.
Yeah, I am good with the modifications that have been discussed so far. I am not opposed to taking more time with it if that's what everyone wants to do. So I am good at taking a deeper look at a few of these issues, and I kind of agree with Commissioner Best that the Board of Supervisors doesn't have the same ability to put the time in that we could. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Williams.
I'm happy with the modifications that we've come up with so far. I also, am happy to kind of concur and defer to Commissioner Best's thoughts, but maybe taking a little more time and getting it really right, because I do think the Board of Supervisors has a lot on their plate and they haven't spent 2 hours already going through all this with a fine-tooth comb. So I'm happy to do that too, because I can see the merit of it. And for the people that really have put a lot of time into this and know it, like Commissioner Best and Commissioner Ruggles, I'm happy to sort of defer to their line of thinking.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Ruggles?
Well, I have considered everything that everyone has had to say up to this point. And I'm going to say that in terms of a continuance to sort out some of the issues that are brought up, two things. This is much more appropriate than some of what we have gone through in terms of folks asking for delays with, say, the Stony Park area plan. And two, Commissioner Walters, I couldn't agree with what he has said about this more, in that the discussion that we have at the commission level, in addition to what has gone on with the committee addressing this, it almost invariably uncovers something that needs a little bit of tweaking or correction or addition or a change in order to get it right. And with respect to that, I would much rather send this on to the Board of Supervisors as something that will require the minimum amount of work and time when they hear this, rather than to send it forward and say, okay, fine, let staff and the board sort it out. I don't want to do that. So everyone else that has suggested taking a little bit more time here, I think that is wholly appropriate. And part of that is, I think, in my opinion, based on, believe it or not, the fact that the committee working on this has been just remarkable in terms of getting the work done to get us this far. It's really a highlight of being on the commission for me in many ways. So that being said, I'll turn it over to the rest of the commission and the chair.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Ruggles. Commissioner Clifford, second thoughts, if any.
I agree with the changes that have been made, and I also agree that we should table this and come back to it next month and look at it, read it over, get some more questions, and get some more in-depth look at it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Clifford. Vice Chair Walters.
Well, I like what everybody's said. I like that we work good as a team on going through and resolving these things. And you know, I just have to give a little analogy here. I worked 4.5 years on the regional plan last time, and I think this impacts us every bit as much, if not to a much greater degree than the regional plan, which is done every 10 years. And so I would like to table it and really make sure that we pass something good onto the board. So that's my thought.
Okay. Okay. This is Chair Ontiveros, and what I will do is I will kind of gather up all of my thoughts, although I think everybody knows them by now.
Madam Chair?
The concerns that I had, I'm gonna tell my fellow commissioners this. I didn't keep track of the amount of hours that I put into reading this, thinking about it, looking at it, talking about it, rereading it. It almost has become a part-time job for me. So everything that I had concerns about tonight have in fact been addressed, specifically the setback. The other things that I had were really kind of clarifications that Ms. Shaw helped me to, actually Ms. Shaw and Mr. Lumpkin brought clarification to. And the big concern about who was going to be doing the monitoring, I am very much in favor of the modification that we put in about that it be done by a qualified experts as determined by the director. I do like what Commissioner Best, I like that calculation that he put out right now on the impacts. It doesn't sound like a lot, 0.05% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have 50 wind turbines, that does add up. Where I'm at as chair, with my concerns being recognized and I feel comfortable with them, I could move forward tonight with making those changes and making an approval to the Board of Supervisors. But what I have heard, because as you guys well know, I don't like to continue things. I don't like to kick the can down the road. But bar none, every other commissioner tonight has said maybe we ought to I'm kind of summarizing this, but the analogy I could give is we have kind of discussed this so much that I feel like we've kicked up quite a bit of dust right now, and that maybe we need to let it settle. And what really is bringing me to that is Vice Chair Walters' comments on the comparison of spending 4.5 years on a plan and this being equally, if not more important, that 30 days, we may want to give it 30 days and let the dust settle. And I also understand and realize that we may come back to in 30 days and they all feel like all of our issues have been addressed. And then if so, we can simply make a motion to send it on as an approval to the Board of Supervisors. But even though I am ready, I could move on tonight with every other commissioner saying, let's give it 30 more days. I don't feel that I can ignore what the other commissioners' desires are at this point. And I think what we need to do is go ahead and make a motion to continue for 30 days. And as chair, I would just like to say, I don't want it continue. You know, if something comes up at the next meeting where it's like, whoa, we just didn't see that. But I think we need to let the dust settle. I think all the other commissioners need to read it, reread it, think about it, and make sure that we get everything out next time. Because I would like to continue moving the process along in an orderly manner, but I don't want to rush it either. So with that, and if I believe I'm understanding all of my other commissioners properly, why don't we go ahead and somebody make a motion for continuance, please?
I'd
Hey,
be
Pete, would you
more than happy to do that.
stand by, please. This is Vice Chair Walters. I see that Jay has his hand up, Director Crystalman. Please address him.
Yeah, please go ahead. And Commissioner Best, I also see your hand.
Oh,
Okay,
Madam Chair and Sir Vice Chair, thank you so much. This is Jay Christman. I would actually like for Commissioner Best to speak first, but I do have some thoughts on this matter, not to throw any wrenches in at the 11th hour, but okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Best.
I would like to hear from Ms. Shaw. If she has anything she'd like to throw in, I'd like to give her the opportunity. And I'm sure that Mr. Crystalman has some good things to say too, but maybe we could start with Ms. Shaw. If she cares to comment. And
yes,
and I want to just say that because I have so much respect for what she's done for the last 2 years on this, and I think that she should have a word if she would like to put one in.
And Commissioner Best, I concur with that. Ms. Shaw, do you have anything you would like to add at this point?
Thank you, Chair Ontiveros and Commissioner Best. I appreciate the opportunity to chime in at this stage. And I have greatly appreciated hearing all of your extremely thoughtful discussion tonight and looking at the detailed nuances of what we've drafted. I do have a very detailed list of what I've heard are your suggested changes. And I would just like to mention that I feel like we could make the changes and forward this on to the board. And there are several reasons for that. We have had 5 now individual supervisor briefings on this ordinance. And I feel from the comments that we've heard from the board, they're ready to see this come through to their across their plate. And the other comment, and this is more of a just a procedural point, is that we have tracked this along with all the changes to the floodplain ordinance, primarily due to all the formatting changes to the code. There's going to be substantial numbering corrections made. We cannot delay the change to the floodplain ordinance because that's on a schedule with Arizona Department of Water Resources. So given that, I just wanted to say that my hearing of your discussion tonight, it seems like these are complicated issues. I've heard the commission basically figure this out, and I would, just suggest that I feel like we at staff level could make those changes to the ordinance and forward it to the board, and that they would be captured. But thank you very much for allowing me to chime in at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Shaw. Director Chriselman.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Best, and Vice Chair Walters, thank you so much. Melissa summed it up very well. It isn't simply that because we have a deadline with our floodplain ordinance, although that is very important. It's more such that I think from a staff perspective, we can address what we've heard from the commission this evening, either in some sort of staff report or a study session at a subsequent commission hearing before it's scheduled to go to the board in June, and address these couple, 3 items appropriately. I think we're hearing exactly what you're saying. I don't think that staff has any objections to what we're hearing. I don't think the committee would have any objections to what we're hearing, but a continuance for a couple of items like this on a project that we've been working on for a couple of years, I'm not sure if that's the appropriate avenue. I with all due respect, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Chriselman. Okay, now your hand is still, okay, Director Chriselman, your hand is still raised. Do you mean for it to be? Okay,
Hand is low.
okay, okay, I know, I see.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Best, you picked right up on that. Okay, as I said, okay, as I stated before, Ms. Shaw and Mr. Chriselman gave the further direction on what a continuance, the problems that it could cause. I stated that I could move forward with this tonight. I still feel that way because my concerns have been addressed and they have been very specific, and we have been very specific in our language as to how they would be addressed. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to run through our list. And after having heard Ms. Shaw and Director Chriselman and my thoughts about, I can move forward. I said it before they said anything. I'm going to go ahead and run through the commissioners and get your thoughts one more time. And this is specifically on a continuance. My question is, can you move forward tonight comfortably without a continuance with the issues that have come to light being addressed? Commissioner Best?
Did I just see a chat that we would have time to have another go at this in April and we would not delay it arriving on time at the supervisors? Schedule, the board hearing is scheduled for May 10th. So if we did it in late April, it could get there by May 10th.
Okay, is the board hearing, I'm going to ask for clarification from Ms. Shaw, because this is in conjunction with the floodplain ordinance. Would the timing be appropriate with that?
Right now, the hearing, if the commission were to refer this on from tonight, then the board hearing would be May 10th. So the floodplain change will go forward to the board on May 10th. If this were continued, if this portion for the renewable energy ordinance were continued to the April meeting with the commission, the May 10th board hearing would be too soon because we wouldn't have time to notice.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think
we got time in June.
I'm okay. I think what I will do is my item at this point is the monitoring condition that we put together for Chevelon Butte. And I will simply, never done this before, but I will forward, if I review that and feel like it's important, I'll just forward that information to my supervisor and let that go. That's really the last thing that, and of course the 219 hours of downtime a year, I don't know how we would come up with a different number, honestly. It would take a lot of research to figure out something different. So I would say I'm comfortable passing it tonight.
Okay, Commissioner Burton?
Yeah, I mentioned before that I'm more or less good with however the commission wants to go. And I was happy with the modifications that we discussed. So I have no problem going forward.
Okay, Commissioner Williams?
Yeah, I was actually thrilled to hear Miss Shaw and Mr. Krisselman saying they could handle the last couple details themselves, and so I'm good going forward tonight.
Okay, Commissioner Ruggles?
Okay, I think that we've heard Director Krisselman and Ms. Shaw say, trust us. And I can't think of two more people that I could place more trust in on this. So given the constraints, the procedural constraints we have, I've got to change my opinion and say that I can go forward with this this evening and send it on with a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors from us to accept this.
Okay, Commissioner Clifford?
We have a short meeting next month, so if we could, I agree, we can send this off. They can make the changes, send it back out to us, we can reread it, and we can reproof it at the next meeting for any changes before it goes to the board. Is that doable? Can we do that?
Well, no, we can't, because the meeting, the Board of Supervisors are having their meeting on May 10th. And that's when the floodplain ordinance goes in with it. And this has been worked in conjunction with the numbering to go through. So if we did that, it would create a pretty big, it created a pretty big job to go back and have this renumbered and reworked through.
All right, yeah, it's because like I'm saying, they can make the changes to it and we can reproof it. They could send it back out to us and we can reproof it and make sure that all of our changes are in there. So it's doable. Yes, I agree. We have two good people who are working on it, and we can send it off to the supervisors.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Clifford. Vice Chair Walters.
I guess my comments are aligned with Commissioner Ruggles. I would like to see the edited version. So if they could send that back out to us, but I agree. We have the director and Ms. Shaw to get this done for us. So I'm good with it.
Okay, thank you. And this is Chair Ontiveros. And as I stated, I am comfortable moving forward tonight, and I'm going to recap just exactly what we're going to do on page 5, 7A, where it talks about for wind energy installations, the setback is to be changed from a half a mile from the property line to a mile. And then the sentence on the monitoring is to be modified. Boy, I got too many papers on my desk. Ms. Shaw, can you read that modification to me, please, so we all know what it says? I always do this. I want everyone to know what we're modifying. That's why I'm taking the time to do this.
Absolutely. And let me go ahead and read the full section number for the record. As it would be in the code. So it would be section 3.19F 3 subparagraph A, and then the last sentence in that subparagraph would read, the methodology of monitoring and compliance reporting shall be done by qualified experts as determined by the director, working with the director. I'll read that again. The methodology of monitoring and compliance reporting shall be done by qualified experts working with the director.
Okay, all right. I am comfortable with those modifications and changes. And like I said, I have put hours into this. I am comfortable moving forward tonight. And so why don't we go ahead and move, I'll accept a motion in a second to move this to recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay, I'll go ahead and make a motion for this. I would like to make a motion to send a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors for approval of AM-20-003 with changes as annotated by staff.
I'll second that.
Okay, I've got a motion by Commissioner Ruggles and a second by Vice Chair Walters to recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors on case number AM-20-003. All of those in favor, please say aye. Commissioner Best.
Aye.
Commissioner Burton.
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Ruggles.
Aye.
Commissioner Clifford.
Aye.
Vice Chair Walters.
Aye.
And this is Chair Ontiveros. I also vote aye. The motion passes unanimously. And while we are on the subject of this renewable energy, I would like to publicly recognize and thank the advisory committee, staff, this commission, and the public who has participated in this meeting tonight. The community involvement has been very good, and I want it to be recognized. And Ms. Shaw, if you would please pass that on to the other members of the advisory committee, I would very much appreciate it. And the last item on the agenda tonight is a call to the public for items not on the agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to address the commission for items not on the agenda? Seeing none, my clock shows 8:42 p.m. and the meeting is adjourned. Good night, everybody, and thank you so very much.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night,
Thanks,
everyone.
Tammy.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
night.
you.